Mastering in Game of Thrones with a mounted axe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 3000 or 10,000. After Arthur made his vow, there was silence all around, but then the quiet atmosphere was broken. Who are you? You dare to say you can punish us? A senior officer of the Tully family shouted. The people of Raventree also chimed in. You are a man from a territory with only a few villages, and you dare to say such a thing? If it weren't for the help of your master on the south bank, you would have died without a burial place. It's a blessing for you that the Earl is willing to give you a golden dragon. Don't be shameless. Edmure saw Arthur act like this. He liked his behavior of upholding justice for his people, but he was also afraid that he would go too far and completely offend the Blackwood family, which would be difficult to end in the future. So he advised, Mr. Arthur, don't be willful. Things have come to this, just accept it. Accept it. Arthur tried to suppress his anger. Why should I accept a murderer going unpunished? Yes, in your eyes, I'm just a small nobleman who is no different from a wealthy knight. My territory is just a sesame seed, and I have only 2,000 or 3,000 subjects. My castle doesn't even have a name. But, like your subjects, Darren and the others pay taxes to me, the Lord, on time every month, and support me in exchange for my protection. They will smile at me and call me Lord. After the village is robbed, they will run to my castle and beg me to get their property back. They are people, living people, with their own lives, their own joys and sorrows. They are definitely not the bugs in your mouths. Arthur became more and more excited as he spoke, pointing his sledgehammer at Titus. Your Excellency believes that the lives of his officers are important, but I also think that the lives of Darren's wife and his unborn child are important. And you, the guardian of the Tully family in the river. Arthur turned the hammer towards them. You actually stopped me from upholding justice for my people. Do you deserve the word guardian? Today, I will be willful for my Darren once. He glanced coldly at the people of the two families. I just want to kill Santuga. I don't see who dares to stop me. After saying that, he strode to Santuga's side. Desmond saw that Arthur was emotional and hurried to protect Edgemere. The people of Raventree City also surrounded the Earl more tightly. Perhaps knowing that his death was near, Santuga cried out loudly, Lord, save me. I'm a loyal dog of your Blackwood family. Are you going to let an outsider slap you in the face like this? Everyone in Raventree City also shouted, do you dare? If you kill him, we will plunder your territory and kill all your people. Let's see how you protect your people. Brynden also shouted on the side, add money, we can add money, please don't kill him, please. Darren looked at his lord expectantly with tears in his eyes, watching his lord do justice for him. The voices of the crowd could not affect Arthur's determination at all. He raised the hammer and smashed it hard. Bang! As expected, the red and white mixed together and splashed far away. It even splashed on Brynden next to him, which made him scream in fear. An officer of the Tully family saw Arthur ignoring their mediation and shouted, you are from the Red Mill family, right? You will regret your willfulness. We, the Tully family. I don't care. Arthur interrupted him loudly, and then turned to the people of Blackwood. I don't care about your threats either. I swear, as long as my people are harmed by you for no reason, even if it's just one person, I will make you suffer the same harm. Even if I become a landless noble, wandering around like a dog, hungry and naked, I will fulfill this vow. This time, if one Santuga dies, I can uncover the matter. If there is a next time, if one person dies, I will choose one of the children of Titus to take revenge. He raised his chin towards the Earl of Raventree City. I heard that you have 3 sons and 1 daughter, so you have to keep a close eye on them, and don't let them leave the small dim castle. I, Arthur Braykin, keep my word. Every word came out of his mouth, and floated into the ears of the people around him. It also fell into the hearts of many people. Facing Arthur's threat, the people of Raventree did not dare to make a sound. Edgemure looked at Arthur quietly, and felt that his figure at the moment was really tall and majestic. Isn't this what he ideally wanted to be like? Protecting the people of 3 Rivers, upholding justice, punishing evil and promoting good. Wait, The Tully officer who had scolded Arthur wanted to say something again, but was interrupted by Edgemere. Enough. Is this reasonable to a noble, who protects his own people? Are we Tullys a family of great evil? He suddenly made a decision. How about this? Raventree will give Mr. Arthur a total of 3,000 gold dragons as compensation for the losses of him and his people. The remaining dead and seriously injured soldiers will be compensated according to the previous rules. Mr. Arthur will release all the captives, and Raventree will not retaliate afterwards. This matter is over. After beating Santuga to death with a hammer, Arthur's emotions were released. He calmed down at this time, and agreed to Edgemere's proposal. Seeing that they failed to save Santuga's life, the people of the Blackwood family all looked at Arthur coldly. But they did not threaten him. They probably took into account the Tully family's face, and would not refuse this proposal at this time. Then it's settled. Earl Titus said without any fluctuation in his tone. I will send someone to get the golden dragon now. When the time comes, we will pay the money, and call the person. Anyway, the three rivers will flow forever, and we will have many opportunities to get along in the future. Arthur heard this and smiled coldly. He knew that this was the Earl of Raventree City hinting that he would play with him slowly in the future. But his power was weak, and even the 500 soldiers today were borrowed. He could only take one step at a time in the future. At this moment, a hearty laugh came. Ha ha ha, we do have many opportunities to get along, Lord Titus. When everyone heard the voice, they turned their heads, and saw that a large group of soldiers were coming with an old man on horseback. The golden shield and the flag of the horse clearly showed that this was a member of the Bracken family. Arthur recognized that this was his cousin, the owner of Stonehenge City, Earl Jandis Bracken. There were enough soldiers. Arthur estimated that there were even more than the Tullys. I have some different opinions on Lord Edgemere's proposal. Nephew, you'd better listen to my point of view. Earl Jandis dismounted and walked towards Arthur and said, a mere 3,000 gold royals is just compensation for the losses of you and your subjects, but they didn't pay Brendan's ransom. He commanded the army to surround him and Arthur, and also surrounded the captives in the middle. In this matter, without 10,000 gold dragons, don't think that we Bracken will release your son. You Titus, who do you think your Blackwood family is? Are you worthy of threatening my nephew Arthur? P.S. Please recommend on monthly votes. Chapter 27, Game of Thrones, Good and Evil and Some Customs. Reader asked her questions in the comment area. I will answer them first. Are nobles working for others? And can Jules inherit the title and territory if he kills Arthur? First, in the area of the southern part of Westeros in Game of Thrones that believes in the 7 gods, nobles should be prefixed with armed. Armed nobles are their real name. The social division of labor of these nobles is the division of labor of all violent institutions such as the army, police, and urban management. What the noble family needs to do is to ensure that the people in the territory are not subject to any violent invasion by forces other than the Lord. The people in the territory only need to pay taxes on time to get the protection of the Lord. Moreover, Westeros is a fiefdom, and the nobles of the upper level will protect the territories of the lower nobles from being occupied by others, but they cannot control those who escape from the territory. To be precise, they do not have a household registration system. Only people who speak Chinese should have a household registration system, but because the cost of moving is too high, it is not circulated. Combining these 2 points, it seems that the nobles are working for others in a sense similar to the positioning of sheepdogs. The second question is that, if Jules kills Arthur, he will be exiled to the wall as a black man. This is also closely related to the armed nobles. In order to maintain the family power and reduce the internal friction caused by the infighting among members, the behavior of an heir who kills the head of the family to inherit the family will be resisted by the whole continent. First, it really infringes on the interests of the dukes and earls. Second, it violates the unspoken rules of the inheritance law. Third, this kind of infighting will greatly consume the family's strength and give the opponent an opportunity to take advantage of it. In order to ensure the strength of the family, the nobles have done everything they can. The custom of positioning the second son as a warrior and the culture of the youngest son as a hostage are all to squeeze the value of family members. In such an atmosphere, if an heir can inherit by killing the head of the family, then all the heirs will have ideas. So as long as there is a case, it will be held down. This practice of thousands of years has made the second sons prefer to go out as mercenaries, rather than return to their own families to rebel. The Blackfire Rebellion of the Targaryen dynasty is another matter. It was actually a conflict triggered by the feud between the River Bay, Stormland and Dawn. These two questions are answered. Thanks again to Chixiodai and Feng for the reward and monthly ticket. The following is a view of good and evil in Game of Thrones. If order, neutrality, chaos, good, neutrality, and evil are divided into 9 grids. The view of good and evil in Game of Thrones that the author of Ice and Fire wants to express is absolute neutrality. This is reflected in killing, that is, you can only kill the person who killed you, and blood revenge. People who are not related have no right to interfere with the life and death of other people. Eddard Stark interfered with the death of the deserter, and he was also interfered with. But the readers of our novels are all Chinese speakers, so this view of good and evil is a bit conflicting. For the Chinese population, the spectrum of good and evil of the vast majority of people is good and neutral, and swings between good order and good chaos with different events. There is a flexible spectrum of good and evil. For example, when you are eager for the Great Master to make decisions for the common people, it is good order. But when the kings, princes, generals, and ministers are not of the same species, it is good chaos. This is also considered the good camp, because it occupies the moral high ground of fighting for yourself. In this culture, the chivalrous and the thieves who rob the rich and help the poor and rob houses will receive sympathy and understanding from most people. For example, the 108 heroes of Liangshan are actually 108 villains, but in public opinion, they are not extremely evil. Even Lu Zishan, the only hero, has killed several people, but he has wisdom. The abbot said that it is not easy for him to kill and set fires, but it is not a satire on him, because he really jumped out of the category of heroes in the end. It is also common to have a flexible spectrum of good and evil. Song Jiang enforced justice on behalf of heaven and ran to Tokyo to give Song Huzang a slap in the face. Another example is the part where Guan Yu shocked to Aksha. The Liang, Jia, and Luhan bandits may have received Guan Yu's seal and formed a party. Guan Yu shocked to Aksha, and Kao Gong proposed to move to Zudu to avoid his sharp edge. This group of Green Forest bandits actually responded to another separatist force and instantly changed their spectrum to the order camp. We may think such behavior is normal, but it does not conform to the good and evil view of Game of Thrones. I think the value orientation of good and evil that Martin wants to express is very similar to a movie, Forrest Gump. In the movie, Forrest Gump treats whoever treats him well, he treats whoever treats him well, whoever treats him badly, he runs away from those who treat him badly, instead of fighting back. Of course, he will beat people, but this is when Jenny is bullied, he thinks, which can be considered as blood revenge in the West. It is just and moral. Later, Jenny did become his family. Our blood revenge was abolished as early as the early Western Han Dynasty, because it did not conform to the ruling order of Confucianism as the skin and legalism as the inside. Because blood revenge gave the family of the beheaded criminal a legitimate reason for revenge. And considering that most of the beheadings were ordered by the emperor, the object of revenge became the supreme ruler. This is a disaster for the stability of order, so it was abolished quickly. Many people say that I was a little bit cruel for not killing the bandits pretending to be Brynden and others, but I think it is normal not to kill them. They did not kill the villagers of Riverside Village first, which was just a dispute, not the Lord's just revenge. But after Santuga killed someone, the Lord, as a family member in a sense, the parent official, could revenge his blood. The above is my point of view. If you have any doubts, then you are right. Chapter 28. What do you want? Janus, this is not your business. Titus glanced at the more than 1,000 Bracken soldiers and reminded them. Janus nodded to Edgemure across 2 soldiers, then turned to the people in Raventree City. Arthur is my nephew. I will take care of this matter. Titus judged the situation and felt that his side still had an advantage. At least in front of the Tullys, the Bracken would not dare to start a war. So he said in a tough attitude, "Why, your arms are so long that you can reach from Stonehenge City across the Red Fork River to me. I have confirmed this with the River Guardian family and have reached an agreement with the victim Arthur. Do you want to fight with me?" Janos was obviously over 50 years old, with wrinkles on his face and half bald hair, but at this time he showed a childlike smile. Arthur felt a little strange when he saw this smile, and then he realized that it was the kind of smile that suddenly came up with some bad ideas. "You Blackwoods are so bold," Janos scolded. "You dare to say in front of Lord Edgemere, war with me, which is forbidden by the Guardian family." Edgemere looked at Earl Janos and suddenly felt a headache. It was clearly a matter that had been settled, but suddenly a troublemaker appeared. Now he had to worry about whether the people of Raventree City could return to the castle alive. The focus of the matter now was on Brynden. As long as the heir of Raventree City was released, there was no need for Stonehenge City to continue to cause trouble. Because the Brackens did not have sustainable logistics here, they would not stay for long. He decided to find a breakthrough from Arthur. So Edgemere said, "Mr. Arthur, I recognize your just demands for the people of the territory. You have agreed to my proposal before. I think as an upright person, you will definitely keep your promise." Arthur also understood the current situation. As long as Brynden was in his hands, he could talk about more benefits. He was about to refuse, but he saw Janos's old face winking at him. Arthur understood that the Lord of Stonehenge wanted him to agree to Edgemere's words. This was a bit difficult, but Stonehenge was his biggest backer, and he couldn't ignore their wishes. After looking back and forth at Edgemere, Janos, and Brynden, he finally made up his mind. "I'll keep my promise and release Brynden after I get 3,000 gold dragons." Edgemere breathed a sigh of relief. "You are a man of noble character." Although Titus didn't know what the Brackens were up to, this was the outcome he wanted, so he agreed. The situation was volatile, so he should get his eldest son back first. When they left Raventree, they brought nearly 2,000 gold dragons as a logistical guarantee in case of emergencies. The Tullys probably also brought gold dragons, and together they would be enough for 3,000. So he sent someone to communicate with Edgemere to discuss whether he could borrow money. After a while, 2 large cowhide bags were placed on the ground in front of Brackens. Lord Janos appointed 2 people to help Arthur count the money. "Good job, kid." The distant uncle patted Arthur on the shoulder. "You deserve it. I heard that you fought very bravely and killed a senior officer for a citizen. I think the ancestors of Bracken and your parents will be proud of you for becoming a qualified lord." 3 citizens. Arthur corrected him. Although he now has 3,000 gold royals, according to the agreement with Hendry, he has to compensate Stonehenge City for the loss of nearly 400 soldiers. But this is obviously impossible, because Arthur can't afford so much money. It seems that Janos is very happy now and can discuss it. "My lord, Hendry told me that he would pay 100 gold dragons for each soldier who died. Isn't that too harsh?" "Call me uncle." Janos now liked Arthur more and more. "Don't worry about what he said. I'm the master of Stonehenge." Arthur felt hopeful when he heard it. "Then how should I compensate you for your loss?" Janos pondered for a moment and said, "How about this? For each person who died, you pay 1 gold dragon." Arthur breathed a sigh of relief. Just when he was happy, he heard another good news. "You have also made contributions in the battle. Seeing that you have caused such great damage to the Blackwood family, I decided to reward you. For every soldier of his family who died at your hands, you can get a gold dragon." Arthur nodded and had a better impression of this uncle. In this way, he only had to pay them 200 or 300 gold dragons. Compared with the 3,000 gold dragons in the account, it was nothing. The time of counting money always passed quickly. The soldier reported that the total of 3,000 was no problem. "My lord Arthur, you should fulfill your promise," Earl Titus reminded from a distance. Arthur nodded, told the soldiers to go away, and then use the dagger he carried on his waist to cut the ropes of Brynden and others. "You will regret this." After saying this, the heir of Raventree City turned around and prepared to leave. Titus's tight strings finally relaxed. His eldest son finally came back. Edgemere was no longer distressed. This Janos was still very reasonable. He thought of the earl who visited his father a few days ago, and no one in Raventree City came to see his feudal lord, so he immediately liked Bracken. But the next second Edgemere's idea was changed by the ruthless reality. The soldiers surrounding Arthur and Earl Janos grabbed Brynden again and pressed him to the ground. "How dare you?" Titus was furious. Arthur, what do you mean? You are cheating after getting the money, right? Arthur was about to clear himself, but he was interrupted by Janis next to him. Alas, you can't frame a good person. My nephew Arthur Braykin has nothing to do with this. The master of Stonehenge laughed with his hands on his hips. Brynden is in my hands now. Arthur released him first, and he didn't cheat. Edmure's face was uncertain. He didn't know what this powerful vassal of the Riverlands meant. But obviously, if Janis wanted to make trouble, the Tully soldiers present could not stop him. Titus was very angry, and didn't speak for a long time. The people around him didn't dare to interrupt a few top nobles. The scene fell into silence. Arthur felt a little embarrassed, but it didn't matter. He avenged Darren's wife and the other 2 people, eliminated the debt of Stonehenge, and got 3,000 gold royals. Now he can get away with it. But the strong desire for gossip made him stay and see what tricks this uncle could come up with. After a long time, Titus asked, "What do you want?" He asked weakly, as if he was too angry to recover. 10,000 gold royals. Janis' voice was obviously much happier. I just said that. The total savings of our Aventry city is less than 10,000, and we just took out another 3,000. Where can we get the money now? Janis was even happier. Can you lend me money? The Free Family, the seafront city, which one can't come up with 10,000 gold royals? You have to understand that money can be earned again if it's gone, but if the eldest son is gone, it's really gone. Titus looked at Edmure with a bitter face for help. Although Arthur thought this uncle was mean, he felt a little happy when he saw the Earl of Raventry City being humiliated. P.S. Please recommend and vote for the monthly ticket. I have been typing on the keyboard for a long time today. My fingers are a little sore, and I'm typing a little slower. Chapter 29 The Thief's News. I don't know how to thank you, Darren said to Arthur while sitting on the cart. Santaga's death happened yesterday. After burying his wife's body in the river, Darren's mental state was obviously much better. Since leaving the battlefield, Darren has been expressing his gratitude. Arthur, who was riding a horse, looked at him. It's okay, this is what I should do. At this moment, he was very happy. It feels good to be needed by others. This feeling is even more pleasant than when he got 3,000 gold dragons. Because he didn't have a specific concept of gold dragons, but Darren's thanks, he heard a lot. Yesterday, under Edmure's mediation, Janis finally made some concessions. After getting the 3,000 gold dragons brought by the Tully family's Clipper and Oars, the Earl of Stonehenge City happily released Brynden. Now, Raventry City owes the Tully family more than 4,000 gold dragons. Even a big family with thousands of soldiers has suffered a lot. After counting the money, the Braykin people left, leaving the Tully family and the Blackwood family to settle the accounts themselves. After traveling for a distance on the road, they boarded dozens of merchant ships waiting there. While underwater, Earl Janis and Arthur also settled their debts, and settled them all at once. In the end, 370 Braykin soldiers died, and Arthur paid the same amount of gold dragons for this. On the other hand, 663 people died on the side of Raventry. Due to the hot weather and humid climate, many seriously injured soldiers on both sides were not rescued. Since it was impossible to count how many innocent souls were killed by Arthur's hammer, the Earl determined that Arthur killed a full 300 enemies according to the impression of his soldiers. So the gold dragons that had just been given back returned 300. As for the compensation for Blackwood, with the thick skin of Janis, it was not carried out at all. Because Raventry had far more people killed than Stonehenge, if the situation was the opposite, Janis would definitely ask Titus to fully compensate for his losses. Of course, Arthur's promise to give 3 silver deer to each of the original 500 soldiers was also fulfilled. Those who were alive were given them on the spot, and those who died were given to the Earl. As the Lord of Stonehenge, he would do a good job of providing relief. During the time on the ship, the Earl uncle showed concern for Arthur in various ways, and his good performance seemed to be a real uncle and nephew. Of course, Arthur also actively cooperated. When they parted, Janis also took the initiative to offer Arthur 100 men on loan to prevent Blackwood's sudden revenge. Arthur accepted it with peace of mind. These 100 men were all elite soldiers wearing iron armor, which was exactly what he needed. The price of this was that Arthur needed to provide them with accommodation and food, and he didn't even need to pay their wages. 100 elite river soldiers, plus the original 35 ordinary soldiers, and the peasant soldiers who could be recruited, were enough to guard several villages. The Earl said that, if Blackwood really retaliated, he would send troops to help. Now Arthur had no worries at all, and could build his own territory with confidence. Since the soldiers loaned to Arthur were all on the big ship, and the ferry at the riverside village was too small, the two sides separated at a large ferry not far from Arthur's territory. After landing, Arthur rode a horse, while the others walked. As for Darren's cart, Arthur saw that Darren had not eaten well in the past few days, and was afraid that he would faint after walking for a long time, so he borrowed one from a nearby village. The conversation just now was Darren expressing his gratitude. The journey was tiring, and even on horseback, Arthur felt a little tired. So when he saw the small castle appear in front of him, he actually felt like going home. I have to have a good sleep when I get home. After seeing the bracken flag with a golden shield and a red horse, Amber, the grey robe, led people out to greet him. You go and find a way to accommodate these people. They are VIPs, and will stay here for a long time. Arthur pointed to the 100 elite warriors behind him, and gave an order. As you say, I will let the villagers camp on the hills in the north. Arthur nodded, agreed with Amber's opinion, and then rode back to the home castle. Amber will take care of the rest. He is a competent steward. Home castle, hall. Are you sure? How dare Cyril's son show up? Arthur asked the villager. Cyril was the servant who stole Arthur's savings of 700 gold dragons. Arthur had previously guessed that he did this for his son who loved gambling. My lord, I'm very sure. He grew up with me. Even if he turned into ashes, I would recognize him. The villager was very sure. Arthur was a little unconvinced. Since you have such a good relationship with him, and grew up together, why did you come to tell me about it? The villager opened his arms, as if revealing his heart. My lord, since we heard that you offended the Tully family and the Blackwood family for Darren, my neighbors and I deeply believe that you are a lord worth following. For such a brave and righteous lord, what's the big deal about reporting a childhood playmate who stole chickens and dogs? Arthur was very satisfied with this. Then tell me specifically about his whereabouts. The villager then told in detail. It turned out that Cyril's son John did not appear in the village openly, but sneaked back in the middle of the night, and was seen by him who came out to squat. The villagers guessed that John must have come to get something. After that, under the cover of night, the villagers quietly followed John out of the village, and made it clear that he ran to the north. The north is the territory of Blackwood. They have always had a bad relationship with Bracken, and they had a big fight a few days ago. It is natural for Cyril to hide there. Very good, you did a great job. Arthur affirmed the villagers' behavior. If I find Cyril, because of your clues, whether I recover my property or not, you will get a reward of 10 silver deer. Hearing this, the villagers were also very happy, bowed and left the hall. Amber came in and reported to Arthur, my lord, it seems that your reward has worked. The reward he mentioned was issued by Arthur to find Cyril. After settling down, in addition to building the territory, the most urgent thing is to find the 700 gold dragons. After all, it is also a sum of money. But in order to ensure that others would not take the initiative for the 700 gold dragons, Arthur only mentioned that he had lost a little property. Finally, 2 days later, he got the news he wanted. Mission: find Cyril and his useless son. Looking at the blue light screen, Arthur felt that it was time to do something. P.S. Please recommend on monthly votes. A Game of Thrones joke every day. Sansa Stark introduced her family members to Cersei. I have 4 brothers. Then you will be so happy. Cersei said enviously. Chapter 30. Inspecting the territory. Finding Cyril was a must. But Arthur couldn't go to Blackwood's territory to find a servant. If he was recognized, he could be arrested and ransomed. Moreover, Cyril and his son John ran away secretly, so they didn't dare to show their faces. Without the experience of living in the lower class, ordinary people couldn't find them. Who should I send? While Arthur was thinking, the butler Amber came in. My lord, the pit you requested has been dug. Looking at him, Arthur suddenly thought of someone. Uncle Jules. After all, the first name he heard after crossing over was Jules from Amber's mouth. As a scoundrel who had been wandering outside for more than 20 years, Jules must have had a lot of experience with this situation. Well, I know. Now go and call Jules and Javier, Arthur ordered. Amber said yes, and turned to leave. Let Jules go to track down Cyril alone. If he catches him, Jules will definitely run away with the money. We need to find someone with strong martial arts to watch him. There were almost no men under Arthur who had received proper knightly martial arts training. Even the original owner was only half-baked. In the villages of the territory, those who knew a little bit of martial arts were selected as soldiers. Grey Robe Amber knew a lot of weapons, but he was only at the level of a veteran. He was probably about the same as Jules. Besides, Amber was responsible for coordinating with 9 villages, so he really couldn't spare the time. And Javier was very much in line with Arthur's current requirements. He was the captain of the 100 soldiers lent to Arthur by Stonehenge City, and his combat ability was at least at the level of a knight. It was not a problem to control Jules. Arthur was relieved that the 2 of them went to track down Cyril and John. The 3 returned quickly, and Arthur briefly introduced the task and sent 2 people off. You only know how to order me to work. Jules was dissatisfied. He was thinking that standing guard was not unacceptable. He only needed to stand every day. Although it was a bit boring, there was no danger, which was in line with his current mentality of seeking stability. Unexpectedly, his nephew found him a job. Or he ran to the territory of Raventree City, which was not friendly to his family. How dangerous. Find Cyril and I'll give you a full set of plate armor, the kind produced in the West. Arthur also knew how to give some sweetness. Just like hanging a carrot and riding a donkey all the time, giving some incentives will make Jules work. Nephew, if you have any work in the future, just tell me, I can do it. Don't be embarrassed to ask, because I'm your elder. Jules patted his chest, and his eyes were different. Arthur smiled. Change your clothes. He knew that this uncle had no resistance to armor. Maybe it was because he couldn't get a set when he was wandering, and he became obsessed with it. The 2 left. Let's go. We are going to inspect the territory, Arthur said to Amber, who stayed behind. After 2 days of rest, Arthur finally decided to do a big job and mobilize the people to build a strong enough village that could accommodate thousands of people. Just build it around the castle. Considering the huge project, the mountain will soon wreak havoc on the banks of the Red Fork River, which requires the joint efforts of more than 2,000 people. So Arthur planned to inspect the area first to see if the people supported it. Arthur could use violence to mobilize people to work, and the Lord did have the right to make people work for free. But Arthur was a modern man after all, and it was impossible for him to force them. Besides, they were tired enough just to survive, and he couldn't bear to make them more tired. Arthur was not a black-hearted heron. The 2 of them set off with a few guards. The hill where the family castle was located was being dug according to Arthur's idea, with a half-man-deep, inverted trapezoidal pit surrounding the hill. The pit was large enough, and the small hill surrounded by it was more than enough to accommodate thousands of people temporarily. According to his idea, a stone wall would be built half a step away from the pit. The stone part did not need to be too high, just up to a person's waist. On top, a little wooden wall would be added, which would be enough to deal with a small army. If a large army came, they would not defend, and would just run away. In the Riverlands, only Reverin and the twins could defend against the Lannister army. The owners of the latter, the Free family, were Lannister's in-laws. The purpose of this construction was to make the enemy have to find a way to cross the moat when they attacked. After crossing the pit, the soldiers attacking the village would not be able to exert their strength at a distance of half a step, and they would have to face attacks from a high position. Just think about how difficult it would be to conquer. Arthur was very satisfied with his idea. Most of the dozens of people who were digging pits on the road stopped and looked at him with a smile after seeing Arthur on horseback. Many people even greeted him from a distance. Arthur responded one by one. Because the news that he stood up for Darren had spread, the people of the Riverlands were very supportive of Arthur. It was morning at this moment. It was another sunny day with no clouds in the sky. The breeze from the Riverlands blew Arthur's grey gold hair, making him look handsome and unrestrained. Grey-robed Amber followed closely behind the Lord, and at this moment he secretly felt that the Lord was really handsome. Forgive him for not having received enough education and only being able to think of this word to describe the Lord. The first village was naturally the nearest riverside village. When they reached the outside of the village, Arthur and his followers dismounted so that they could appear more approachable. Otherwise, riding a horse high above would make the necks of the people uncomfortable. Look, it's Lord Arthur. It's the righteous Arthur. Soon, some villagers spotted them. Some came over to express their welcome, and some ran to inform the village chief so that he could be ready. At this time, the adult laborers were working in the fields or workshops, and those strolling in the village were either young boys or staggering old men. But no matter who it was, after knowing that this was their lord, they all greeted him with a smile. Soon, Arthur walked to the center of the village, and a large number of people gathered around him. Many people were whispering about Arthur's heroic deeds a few days ago, and the details were different in various versions. But no matter what they said, it was as if they were all there. The speaker was proud and had the pleasure of confessing, and the listener was also proud to have such a lord. Arthur pricked up his ears to listen to the evaluation of his subjects, and he was also very proud. This feeling was just like the little red flower given to him by the teacher and the praise in front of the whole class after doing good things in kindergarten and elementary school in his previous life. He admitted that he didn't want to see such a scene when he stood up for Darren at that time. He just couldn't stand the way those nobles treated civilians like livestock and insects, and then he got too excited. Although he was hot-blooded, he also offended many people from the Tully and Blackwood families. But if he were asked to choose again, he would still choose the same way to deal with it. Not for any reason, just for a little conscience in his chest and the hot blood surging in his body. At this time, a child came over and urinated on his cloth shoes. Because of the hot weather, leather boots and iron armor could not be worn, so Arthur wore cloth shoes and linen socks on this trip. The child's urine made him clearly feel a hint of damp heat coming from his feet. P.S. Please give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 31. We will do whatever you ask us to do. Arthur was stunned and looked at the naive little boy, feeling happy. As for such a small matter as peeing on shoes, he didn't care. Boy's urine is auspicious. He picked up the little boy, held his little head and asked, "Little guy, what's your name?" The little boy didn't answer, looking at him with brown eyes. Arthur didn't care about such things, but someone else did. Amber in grey robe hurriedly shouted, "Whose child is this? How dare he pee on the shoes of the Lord? Come and clean the shoes for the Lord." Several villagers followed and scolded the boy's parents. A panicked young woman squeezed out of the crowd, her face full of apology and fear. "I'm sorry, Lord Arthur, I'm sorry." She was about to bend down to clean Arthur's shoes. It's okay. Arthur retracted his feet so that the woman couldn't touch her shoes. The woman was at a loss, mumbling to express her apology. But it was obvious that she was very uneasy with a trembling voice because her child was still in Arthur's hands. "It's really okay. Hasn't the child been named yet?" The woman nodded, and only after confirming that Arthur really didn't care did she feel relieved. "I think this P is quite accurate, which means that he and I are destined to be together." Arthur teased the little boy. "I'll give him a name. Well, let's call him Arthur, the same name as me, to commemorate this P." "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir." The woman thanked repeatedly. Arthur held the little boy to her, and the crowd around him suddenly burst into applause. Most people had a better impression of Arthur. "This is for you. It's very sweet. I tasted it." A timid female voice came. Arthur felt someone pulling his trouser legs. He pretended to look around. "Huh? Why can't I see anyone? Could it be an elf in the air?" This action made the villagers laugh. "Hateful." The female voice seemed a little angry. Arthur looked down and found that it was a little girl holding a peach that had been eaten. "Eat it. It's very sweet." The girl insisted on handing it to him. The village chief Jace squeezed in at this time, saw the peach that had been eaten, and shouted, "How can you give Lord Arthur a peach that he has eaten? Don't you even want to give him a complete peach?" Arthur took it took a bite, and said while chewing, "Put away your ugly face. You are a village chief, but you are more fierce than me, the lord. Is that right?" Seeing that Arthur was angry, Jace immediately changed to a flattering smile and tried to explain. But Arthur didn't listen and bent down to praise the little girl's peach for being really sweet. The villagers were even happier when they saw Jace's embarrassment. Seeing that Arthur was so friendly, they invited him to their homes. Some asked Arthur to name their children, and some asked Arthur to treat their illnesses. Arthur refused all the guests. He did it on the spot when he wanted to name them, and he couldn't do it when he wanted to treat his illness. "Who treated you before?" he asked curiously. "No one. Sometimes you can see a monk passing by and get a checkup. Now, I don't know why, the monks are gone," someone answered. Arthur questioned Jace, "Why didn't you tell me about this situation?" Jace was stunned. "Isn't this normal? Why should I bother you?" Arthur was speechless about the village chief. The village chief's duties were not fulfilled at all. He just bullied the civilians. When there is time, find a reliable person and replace him. But Jace's idea was right. They have never had anyone to see a doctor, and they are used to it. Arthur carefully recalled the memories of his previous life. It seems that in the world of Game of Thrones, only the Maesters of the big families in the north, who believe in the old gods, treat the civilians, such as Maester Luwin of Winterfell. But in the south, who believe in the seven gods, only small monks treat the civilians. The Maesters treat and advise the nobles. To be more precise, they treat the great nobles. There are no Maesters and ravens in Arthur's castle. Of course, when the original owner was sick, he always went to Stonehenge to see a doctor. He didn't ask about the people. After Sandor Clegane was defeated by the Beauty, it was a kind monk who saved him. This is also the reason why the High Sparrow, who was born as a monk in the later period, can call the shots in King's Landing. They follow the mass line. Arthur thought about it and asked, "There must be a place nearby where you can pay for medical treatment, right?" "Yes, there is one in the beauty market, but it is very expensive, 1 silver deer per time, not including the medicine money. If you can spend money, it will be easy." Arthur waved his hand, "Then invite him to treat you." Stonehenge earned 180 gold royals, and Brendan's incident brought in nearly 3,000 gold royals. He is now very rich. But it's very expensive. Someone sighed. "As long as it can make you healthy, what does it matter if I spend a little money?" Arthur pretended a little. He turned to Amber and said, "Remember to remind me about this, and go and invite the monk tomorrow." Amber nodded. The crowd cheered. Arthur saw that the atmosphere was good, so he expressed his idea. "Well, I plan to build a stockade to defend against potential enemies." Arthur did not say it was the mountain, because no one would believe it if he said it. "Are you going to guard against Raventree?" "We will do what Arthur said. We will do whatever you ask us to do." The villagers spoke out their ideas. Some people even speculated that the Lord was guarding against the Blackwood family. Seeing this, Arthur did not point out this statement and acquiesced. The enthusiasm and support of the villagers exceeded his imagination, and the matter was settled. What's more, it was still several months before the harvest, and there was not much work in the fields, so building a stockade would not delay things at all. The seasons in Game of Thrones are different from our 4 seasons. Summer can last for 10 years. I don't know why Martin set it this way. Amid the villagers' strong persuasion, Arthur and others left Riverside Village and went to the next village. The remaining 8 villages were also more or less the same, and they all strongly supported Arthur's decision. In the evening, large pieces of flaming clouds floated in the sky, and the twilight cast a beautiful filter on the earth. Arthur and others rode on horses in the sea of flowers and grass. Looking at the picturesque beauty around him, he sighed, "My territory is so beautiful. It has always been like this." Amber said a correct nonsense. Arthur continued to sigh, "My people are also kind and lovely. They may be pretending." Amber said in his heart, "When the tax is collected, you will know whether they are really kind and lovely or fake." Arthur ignored his words and continued to be moved by himself. "I must protect them. This is what you should do." Amber insisted on echoing the Lord's words. His lord turned back and glared at him. "You'd better not interrupt when I talk to myself." Amber nodded aggrievedly. Several people continued to move forward. Before the knight established a stable rule in the sky, they returned to the castle. P.S. Please recommend on monthly tickets. Also, does anyone know the Utah ZHIN meme? Evil smile, a mountain blade joke every day. The Swadian spy boasted to the Rodic spy, we know the size of the garrisons, the level of training, and the food reserves of all your castles. So what? The Rodic spy shot back, we know when your King Harlaus plans to declare war on the Nords, the Veges, the Kurgits, and the Saranids. Chapter 30 to explain the combat power issue. Some readers said that the combat power collapsed, but that is not the case. Because this is a system article, I did not mention some default cheats. I thought everyone knew about it, but there are really readers who do not understand. For a normal person, his strength fluctuates with his state. When he has a cold or diarrhea, he is definitely weaker than normal. For example, after the Horse King is infected, it is not certain whether he can beat an adult man. But the protagonist is different. The attributes of the system panel are fixed. In other words, in theory, the protagonist is always at the peak of strength. This is a problem. If the battle lasts for a long time, will the protagonist's strength decrease with the consumption of physical strength? After the protagonist is injured, will the strength decrease? After the decrease, do the system attributes still count? After many system writers have practiced many times, they have come to a conclusion. That is, the protagonist's strength will not decrease, otherwise it will be very poisonous and unpleasant. In other words, a default cheat of unlimited physical strength is used. This is the only way to avoid logical bugs. For example, when you play Mountain Blade, if you don't lose blood, you can ride a horse to escape a large group of soldiers, and then kill them one by one. This is the reason. For the matter of injury, a cheat that locks blood for minor injuries is also defaulted. As for serious injuries, under normal circumstances, the protagonist cannot be seriously injured. Because he is the protagonist, bigger is here. But if the plot requires that the protagonist be seriously injured, then the attributes of the panel will be ignored. With infinite stamina and light injury bloodlock, under these two conditions, the protagonist is a humanoid robot powered by a nuclear reactor. Normal people will be exhausted after chopping a few people, but the protagonist can keep chopping. What's more, the opponents are all ordinary soldiers, without masters, so they will naturally be beaten one by one. And the hammering down of 300 people does not mean that 300 people died, but 200 were seriously injured, because the weather in the Riverland was hot and humid, and there were no doctors to save them. When the army of the Wolf family in the north went south, the long summer ended, and it was almost autumn. The time in the book was still 2 or 3 months away from this point, and the temperature was incomparable. What's more, in the world of Game of Thrones, doctors are in short supply, and the bachelors of each castle serve as doctors. The level of poisoning is high, and most of the treatments are done with poppy milk. There is no hope, it can't be cured. Just drink poppy milk, and wait for death. And there is another problem. The Sword of the Dawn is strong, but that is for knights who use swords. The Westeros soldiers, who are called wearing iron clothes by the Horse King, are all soldiers in full iron armor. In the series, there are many mistakes in armor. Robb, the King of the North, doesn't even have calf armor and iron boots. Is it possible? The effect of swords in breaking armor is far inferior to that of hammers. In the wrong spring of 281, at the tournament of Harrenhal, Prince Rhaegar defeated the fearless Gersipston and became the first. But 2 years later, he was hammered to death by Robert Baratheon, who used a sledgehammer at the Ruby Shoals. Why? On the battlefield, only those who can break armor are the gods of war. As for bows and arrows, the effect of breaking armor is not very good. As for crossbows, I have only seen the joystick crossbows that Joffrey played, and I have not seen them equipped in the army on a large scale. Bed crossbows and the like only appeared in the later period when shooting dragons, and they seemed to be useless in the early period. After all, in the handmade era, those large crossbows were very expensive, and it was not cost effective to kill several people with one arrow. It's better to let the soldiers go up and chop them. The advantage is low human rights. So I think the combat power is not broken. If you have any questions, you are the main one. Chapter 33 How to catch a sheep and fleece it. Stonehenge City Hall. You mean, you want me to help you find stonemasons and carpenters in my territory? Janice asked, looking at Arthur sitting in front of him. Arthur nodded. That's right, but it's not just a few stonemasons and carpenters. I also need a large number of adult men to cut trees, dig pits, move stones, and a bachelor to direct the construction. It would be great if he has experience in building a city. Of course, I will pay for it. In addition, I also need to stockpile a large amount of food such as potatoes, wheat, peas, and some spices, wine, clothing and other sundries. I hope to buy them from my uncle's territory. 3 days ago, after he mobilized the people to build the stockade, he suddenly found that they could not build it alone. Not to mention that the available laborers of more than 1,000 people can only dig pits and cut trees, not to mention the problem of building stone walls. Just coordinating the meals and accommodation of thousands of people has made Arthur and Amber busy. In the final analysis, it is because they have no experience. After getting them on the right track of digging pits, Arthur immediately went south to seek help from the Earl of Stonehenge City. Earl Janice took a sip of wine and said leisurely, "No problem at all." He extorted 3,000 gold royals from Raventree City, and he was in a good mood recently. After thinking for a while, the Earl said, "I can also issue an order to let some masters and apprentices in the workshops in my territory help you, for free. Adult males are not a problem. Do you want dozens or 1 or 200? Arthur answered sincerely, "About 2,000, a month's work." Janice almost lost his glass. "Are you going to renovate the family castle?" 2,000 adult males, even in his earldom with a population of 100,000, is not a small number. No, it's to build a larger stockade, so that when a war breaks out, my people can come in for refuge, so the workload is a bit larger. Hearing this, Janice liked this distant nephew even more. "Don't worry, as long as the people of Raventree City dare to retaliate against your territory, I will send troops to poke their asses." He subconsciously thought that Arthur was guarding against the Blackwood family. Arthur did not correct Janice's misunderstanding. No one could have imagined the political direction of Westeros in the next few months. The alliance between the North and the Riverlands had no real conflict with the Lannisters in the West, except that the two families held hostages. If Eddard Stark had not been beheaded by Joffrey and the fool Robb had not claimed the throne, I'm afraid that after the little devil came back, Tywin would be happy to make peace with the two families. There are always many fools. If Robb had a little bit of the heart of his ancestor, King Tormund Stark, he would not think of claiming the throne. Because of these factors, the entire Riverlands became the worst hit kingdom in the War of the Five Kings. Farmers were displaced, the food accumulated over the years was robbed by various troops as military rations, and the village was burned to the ground. Even the Wolf family, which Arthur liked more, never restricted the northern army's looting in the river. It can only be said that there are few good people among these nobles. "Thank you for your great help." Arthur took the wine glass handed over by the manservant and took a sip. Very good wine. Although he thought the wine was ordinary, he still praised it against his conscience. After all, he was asking for help. "If you can stay in Stonehenge City for a few days, I can call Benji, the Maester of Allen City. He has experience in building cities and meets your requirements." After thinking for a while, Janice gave his suggestion. The Vance family of Allen City is a strong branch of the Vance family of Travel Rest City. It is also the title of Earl, and has always had a good relationship with Stonehenge City. That would be the best, but I have to go to your territory to buy things, and have no time to accompany you. This Benji, please invite him here, I will pay him enough salary. That's not necessary. The Earl waved his hand. "Allen City owes me several favors. Let their Maester work for you for free." Although he didn't understand why Janice was so enthusiastic, Arthur accepted and expressed his gratitude. The Earl emphasized again, 2,000 adult males. "I can also issue an order to ensure that you get truly capable people who can work. You only need to provide food and lodging." "Thank you very much." Arthur felt more and more that something was fishy. These two conditions were not small favors, and he didn't know what Janice wanted to do. As for craftsmen, carpenters and so on, I have many workshops under my name. Let's do this. I'll let Hendry take you to various villages in the afternoon, and you can choose from them. The total number of masters and apprentices should not exceed 200. It was another big favor. You know, if 200 people in the workshop left their jobs, it would stop a lot of ongoing work, which would be a great loss. Arthur was even a little afraid to accept it, in case the Earl made some strange requests. But in order to build a defensive stockade, he had to accept it. I'm really sorry to make you do this. Arthur was interrupted by Janos before he finished his words of thanks. No big deal. The owner of Stonefence City suddenly came closer, and his aging face came into Arthur's sight. If you can kidnap Braywood's people again, I will give you more help. Arthur was shocked. You mean I want to kidnap Brynden again? This is not a trivial matter. If Arthur does this again, no matter whether he is right or wrong, he may not be able to survive on the north bank of the Red Fork River. Alas, Janos dragged out a long sound in his throat. How can you catch a sheep and fleece it? Old Titus has 3 sons and 1 daughter, the second son Lucas, the third son Horst, and the daughter Bethany, all of whom can be kidnapped. Of course, I don't want you to focus on kidnapping, but just want you to pay attention to this matter. If you have the chance, do it to his family. I will back you up. Arthur agreed very readily. Anyway, it's not a mandatory requirement, so don't worry about it. A few months later, the War of the Five Kings will start, and who will remember such a trivial matter? After finalizing the details, Janos, Arthur, Hendry, and Janos's daughter Jane had lunch together. In the afternoon, accompanied by Hendry, Arthur went to more than a dozen large villages and successfully selected 200 craftsmen from the workshops, including experienced masters and a certain number of apprentices. He would take these people back to the riverside village first, and then come back to receive 2,000 laborers. Of course, he would also purchase a large amount of food and daily necessities at the same time, and let these laborers carry them to his territory. At night, Stonefence City. This Arthur is too troublesome. Hendry complained to his uncle when he returned to the castle. Isn't it just a small territory? Why go to so much trouble? Janos didn't take his nephew's complaint seriously. They are guarding against a big family like Blackwood. There is nothing wrong with this. You can't prepare for a war with the 7 kingdoms. After all, he has been staying in his small castle for too long and has no experience. He just had a fight with Raventree Castle, but he is so nervous and suspicious. The Earl nodded and agreed with Hendry's point of view. That's true. Lord Eddard and King Robert are young and strong. The days of peace will last for a long time. Arthur's reaction is too much. Of course, I support him to do this. I will never oppose any action that can fight against Raventree Castle. The stone walls of Stonehenge recorded their words. Soon, they will regret their stupidity and praise Arthur's foresight. P.S. Please recommend and vote for the monthly ticket. A joke of Game of Thrones every day. Before the blood of the last riverman is shed, we in the North and the Stark family will never make peace with the Lannisters. Chapter 34 The Boring Life of a Lord. I have never seen such love for the people in my life. Benji said to Arthur. He was a standard bachelor, wearing a formal grey robe and a necklace with a bachelor's symbol. It is said that people who are familiar with this kind of necklace can tell the rank of the owner. The original owner's family did not employ or come into contact with many bachelors, so Benji's rank could not be seen from the necklace. I just treat them as human beings. Arthur responded lightly. It has been 10 days since Benji arrived. After he took over the command, the project suddenly became standardized and orderly. The ring pit has been excavated for half a month, and the wall is also being built simultaneously. The outline of the stockade that Arthur envisioned has already taken shape. The design of the ring pit was supported by Benji, and he also added a few points. That is, the ground between the stone wall and the ring pit can be piled up a little more inclined. Just enough to stand, but not too strong. And in the ring pit, introduce dead water, mix with soft soil, and make mud. The pit is also dug a little deeper, about 1.5 people deep. In such a situation, once the soldiers in armor got stuck, they would have no chance of getting out without help from outsiders. Arthur also felt that this kind of mud pit in the moat was stronger than his original idea. After all, intellectuals are more malicious. The 2,000 adult men promised by Count Janos have also arrived. Every day, they carry large stones from the riverside and transform them into suitable shapes under the command of stonemasons. The whole village is large enough to accommodate 3,000 people for food, drink, defecation, and urination. In order to ensure drinking water and hygiene, Arthur also ordered 10 wells to be dug and dozens of toilets to be built. Of course, a large number of wooden houses were built around Arthur's castle. The most common tall tree in the river is the beech tree. This is a deciduous tree that can reach a height of 30 meters and is a good material for making furniture. The workshops along the 3 rivers use the wood of this tree to make handicrafts that are popular in the 7 countries. Of course, beech trees are also used to build wooden houses and repair the walls of the village. Then you keep an eye on them. I'll go check on the training of the new recruits. I'm happy to serve you, Lord Arthur. After Arthur said goodbye to Benji, he went to the training ground around the castle. Here, Amber was getting the newly recruited militia familiar with their weapons, the half-handed swords. After Arthur proposed to build a stockade, he recruited 50 militiamen in the name of strengthening the defense of the territory. They were all strong men selected from various villages. These people did not participate in the construction of the stockade, but only trained with several elite soldiers from Amber and Bracken every day. It was really that Amber had no one under Arthur to organize it. It's impossible to let the guest soldiers manage it, right? As for armor, there is no armor yet, and Arthur needs to think of a way. He hasn't made up his mind yet whether to rob some, or go out and find a great noble to buy it. He did get a batch of weapons. 100 half-handed swords from the beauty market. This is the most common knight's sword in Westeros, also called a one-handed sword, a hand-geared sword, or a single-handed mixed sword. According to the development of weapons in the previous life, this was the mainstream weapon in the late Middle Ages in Western Europe. The product features are the integration of the stab of the knight's sword, the slash and chop of the two-handed sword, and the classic of the long sword. There are no obvious shortcomings, nor are there any outstanding advantages. The main focus is on balance. Thanks to the extremely popular knight culture in Westeros, the weapons equipped by the army are also knight-like. In addition to the half-handed sword, the infantry are generally equipped with round shields, knight sword shields, dual shields and other shields. The concave shields used for lances will not be equipped in large quantities by the army. What Arthur couldn't understand was why no lord in this land liked to give soldiers weapons such as lances and spears. For small-scale battles, the combination of shield and sword is indeed more suitable. With a slightly larger number of people, the combination of lances and battle formations is obviously advantageous. And no army likes to equip a large number of crossbows. Whether it is an arm-drawn crossbow, a waist-drawn crossbow, a kick-drawn crossbow, or Joffrey the Great's rocket crossbow and bed crossbow, there are no large-scale equipment troops. In addition to plate armor, chainmail and halberd armor can break the defense of the crossbow. Leather armor, cloth armor, etc., bows and arrows can break through the defense and cause casualties. Arthur guessed that this abnormal development of weapons was influenced by the dragons of the Targaryen family. As long as a dragon appears, it is an overwhelming advantage, and ordinary soldiers cannot influence the situation of the war at all. In this abnormal atmosphere, the long spears and crossbows that should have been developed have all stagnated. Only the armor has been updated and developed to the level of plate armor. Ordinary soldiers have become the security brigade and the nobles' bodyguards, with a function of collecting taxes at most. Arthur wondered whether he should talk to Benji to see if he could get some long spears, crossbows, etc. to equip his troops. "My lord, our training business is booming," a recruit said to him. It is called a recruit, but on Arthur's troop panel, it is called a peasant soldier. After he carefully studied the panel, he came up with the upgrade route of an ordinary soldier. There are 5 levels in total. Take the Hegian soldiers as an example. The first level is the unarmored peasant soldiers, followed by recruits, veterans, warriors, and shield-carrying heavy infantry. The 100 elite soldiers who helped defend Shelley City are at the level of 3rd level veterans. And Amber is also a veteran. The 35 before are shown as 2nd level recruits. After knowing this, Arthur was deeply shocked. There is only one veteran soldier who really belongs to him, and the rest are recruits and unarmored peasant soldiers. It seems that they have not been trained or fought. With this little strength now, they can't go out to fight with others to upgrade their soldiers. Arthur can only order them to increase their training every day. "Continue training," the Lord responded. "Amber, you also practice." Arthur saw the steward standing in front and ordered. Now all the soldiers under his command have to be trained for him. Amber had a bitter face and reluctantly joined the training team and was guided by the elite soldiers who helped defend the city to practice sword dancing. After watching a twisted sword dance, Arthur returned to the site of the village to supervise the progress. Both Arthur's subjects and the laborers on the south bank were working very hard. He couldn't find a typical lazy person. This dull and boring life of a lord. There wasn't even a maid in black silk stockings in the castle. Arthur really found it a bit boring. He could now understand why the king and the great nobles held a tournament that could attract knights and nobles from all over the continent. Because it was too boring to stay in one's own territory. Not everyone was like Marquis Walder-Free who had married 10 wives. And Arthur himself, no noble around him was interested in him and was willing to marry his precious daughter to him. Just when he was bored, someone came over. We found Cyril's trace. P.S. There aren't many votes recently. Can you give me some recommendation votes and monthly votes to comfort my young and fragile heart? Chapter 35. Let him die quickly. Uncle Jules, you are really a talent. Arthur gave a thumbs up and praised Javier, and he disguised themselves and went to the north to look for Cyril and his son John. After nearly 20 days, they finally found them. Needless to say, it was hard and torturous, but they found them anyway. Looking at Javier's tired face, you can tell that it must not be easy. Jules confirmed that they were hiding in a farm near the beauty market, protected by a group of gamblers. Because they were so many, Jules and Javier had to come back to get reinforcement. Arthur guessed that Cyril and his son were actually detained by the gamblers. It's just that I don't know if the gamblers know that they have a huge sum of 700 gold dragons. This matter must be solved quickly, otherwise Master Spinach will not be able to hold the money. By then, Cyril and John will be found, but Arthur's money will be gone, which is not good. Choose 5 elite soldiers with strong skills in martial arts, and we will set off now. Arthur ordered Javier. Javier received the order and left. Jules looked at Arthur eagerly, with a childlike look on his face. Don't worry, your armor will not be missing, but it is not available now. When we have time, we will go to King's Landing to pick a good set, and also give me a big sword and a bigger hammer. Arthur said so. Jules scorned his nephew, said nothing, and left angrily. Arthur did not mean to buy it next time, but it was really impossible to buy it now. If armor could be bought in a small country town like the beauty market, the whole Westeros continent would not be far from chaos. After some preparations, the 8 people set off and rode to their destination. Looking at the white-haired old man sitting in the corner in front of him with a dagger stuck in his belly, Arthur actually felt a little pitiful for him. After an afternoon and half a night of galloping, they arrived at the farm. Coincidentally, the gamblers were all out for fun. Unfortunately, Cyril had been stabbed with a dagger and was waiting in a bad mood, and there was not a single copper coin in the whole farm. Where is your son John? Where is my money? Tell me now, Arthur shouted. But pity is just an idea. The lost golden dragon is real. The original owner probably died because of Cyril. Of course, he will not be soft-hearted. The light of a torch reflected the coagulated blood on the ground. The old man slowly opened his eyes and saw Arthur and the soldiers behind him. He said weakly, "It's you, little adult." Since Cyril had experienced 2 generations of Arthur's father and Arthur, he called Arthur little adult to distinguish between father and son. Why are you still using honorifics now? Are you trying to win sympathy? Don't think I will forgive you. Of course, Arthur didn't buy it. He was a cruel man. He would hit the most evil servants hard. I'm sorry, He pressed his wound and tried to stop the bleeding, although he knew it was futile. I'm really sorry for stealing your money. I was also confused when I poisoned you. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done it. Cyril admitted something intermittently, but Arthur didn't want to hear this at all. Where are my money and my gold royals? Tell me. John took them away. He used them to gamble. Cyril looked unhappy, whether it was regret or pain. Look, shouldn't I give him another blow? Arthur asked Javier beside him. I don't think it's necessary. He's not far from death. Javier disagreed. I think it's better to give him another blow, so that the old man won't get better after we leave. Because the family's 700 gold royals were stolen, Jules also disliked Cyril. My little lord, like your father, you are an upright man. Can you listen to my confession? So that I, a sinner, can feel better when I die. Cyril asked weakly. Seeing that he was dying, the lord didn't want to give him another blow. Why should I listen to your nonsense? Arthur ignored him and turned to ask Jules, where should we go to find Jon? It's better to stay here. These gamblers have only this one place to go. They will come back sooner or later. They should be in the casino in the beauty market now. There are soldiers stationed there at night. It's not easy for us to go in, Jules suggested. Arthur affirmed his uncle's opinion. Then let's rest here. I feel very tired after riding all the way, let alone you. The others heard Arthur's order and went to find a comfortable place to rest for a while. When the gamblers come back, there will be a fierce battle. It's not okay if you don't adjust your state. Arthur also found a chair to sit down. He now has some burdens of being a lord and is unwilling to sleep on the ground like the soldiers. I grew up with your father, Cyril was muttering in a low voice. Arthur wanted to go over and punch him twice to make him shut up. But Cyril's miserable appearance also made Arthur give up this idea. Why bother with the dead? Yes, in Arthur's heart, this is a dead man. Cyril didn't care if the little adult was listening or not, and he kept talking intermittently. Arthur couldn't sleep because of his biological clock, and he actually listened to Cyril's words. In general, one sentence can summarize the life of this old man. Don't despise the poor young, don't despise the poor middle-aged, and don't despise the poor old. There may be follow-ups such as the dead are the greatest, the tears of grave robbers, and the shaking heads of the White Walkers in the future. When I accepted the mediocrity of my parents and my own mediocrity, I didn't accept the mediocrity of my son Jon. So, Cyril began to talk about Jon again, and Arthur actually listened carefully. Well, this is also a tragedy. He actually felt a little sympathy for the old man. Cyril grew up with Arthur's father. One was a nobleman and the other was a servant. Although Arthur's father was not bad to Cyril, Cyril was a little unwilling to accept his fate. But there was no way, his birth had been determined. Coincidentally, the two had sons almost in the same year, so Cyril had another idea. If he couldn't do it himself, his son could always do it. So he saved money to let his son Jon go to the monks to study, and also let his son go to the beauty fair to find free knights to practice martial arts. Unfortunately, not all monks are kind, and not all free knights, also called wandering knights, are good people. Jon quickly learned bad things and fell. In comparison, the original owner was much more glamorous, tall, handsome, and well behaved, and his father actively saved money for his son. This made Cyril fall into deep pain. His parents were not as good as others, he himself was not as good as others, and his son was not as good as others. What's more painful is that Arthur's father was very good to him and Jon. Even if he hit me twice and scolded me twice, I would hate him and these damn nobles. When Jon did something wrong and was caught, it was Arthur's father who came forward to mediate and get him back. Every time Arthur's father did good things to them, it was like a needle piercing Cyril's heart. Until the old lord died. But the old man was so kind and upright, I can't find a single memory that can make me hate him. I'm really confused. I don't know what made my life like this, and I don't know who to hate. My life was going to be like this, and I would continue to serve you until I died of old age. But Jon owes more and more money. I don't want to steal the little man's things to fill Jon's holes, and Jon is a bad guy who is idle. But he is my son after all. When he said that his hands would be chopped off if he couldn't pay the money, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have done this. When I heard that you were still alive, my guilt was alleviated a little. Jon used some of the money to pay off his debts. I wanted to return the rest to you, but I didn't expect Jon to stab me and take away all the gold dragons. After I said it, I feel more at ease when I die. Little man, I know that my father and I are guilty of deep sins that cannot be forgiven. I pray that you let my son die quickly. This may be the only thing I can do for him. P.S. Please recommend and vote for me. Chapter 36. Where are the remaining golden dragons? Old man Cyril's words made Arthur feel a little uncomfortable. Was Cyril wrong to steal the golden dragon? He was indeed wrong. Cyril, who wanted his son to be successful, was right. He just hoped that his son could become a talent. However, since the aristocracy controlled the vast majority of resources, the common people had no chance to get ahead. In the history of Daksha in the previous life, there were almost no ways to improve one's class, such as studying, becoming an official after learning well, joining the army, and being awarded a title for outstanding military exploits, or even self-castration, and entering the palace, to serve the emperor and his empress to improve one's class. Even the two well-known low-born octopus spiders, Earl Varys, and the finance minister, Littlefinger Petyr Baelish, in King's Landing, were not of real commoner origin. Varys has dragon blood, and he is probably a descendant of the Blackfy family, a branch of the Targaryen family's illegitimate sons. And Littlefinger Baelish is an aristocrat with a clear family tree and a clear territory, although he was a bit shabby when he was a child. Besides, Littlefinger has always represented the interests of the emerging business class on the east coast of Westeros. There are many small nobles in the valley who have financial resources, but no status to support him. Of course, this kind of small noble should be called new lord, new nobles, to distinguish them from old nobles who only occupy territory, similar to the concept of new money and old money. The mercenary Bronn and the Onion Knight Davos all fought for their lives, and such examples can be counted on one hand in the whole continent. The real civilians in Westeros have almost no way to be promoted, except to wear black clothes, to be night watchmen and run to the citadel to carry fesses and urine pots for the senior maesters. Born as civilians, they are civilians all their lives, without surnames, family emblems, family languages, and knights fighting for them. There is no opportunity to receive education, no opportunity to receive maesters' medical treatment, and no opportunity to pursue equality. The degree of class solidification is comparable to that of a slave society. Cyril was silent for a long time. Arthur walked over with a torch and saw that the old man tilted his head and stared, and he was already dead. Alas. I hope you will be born well in your next life. Arthur could only wish him this. After closing the old man's eyes, he also sat in the chair and leaned back for a while. They're back. Arthur was awakened by Jules, who was sleeping soundly. The Lord picked up the sledgehammer and was ready to start. Temporary sentimentality would not limit his performance. It was almost dawn, and it was gradually getting brighter outside, but the room was still dark enough to block his vision. The 8 people hid by the wall, waiting for the gamblers to come in. Arthur and Javier agreed to let this professional officer give the order to attack. After all, Arthur only has amazing fighting ability, and his command has not been experienced in actual combat. According to Joel's intelligence, there are about 9 of these spinach monks. 6 armored veterans plus Javier, and Arthur the Hammer God, are enough to deal with them. Arthur also had to slow down his movements, lest a few hammers leave no one alive. Tamard, today's luck is really bad. John, your money has made us lose a lot again. You don't mind, right? How could that be? Making my brothers happy is the greatest meaning of my golden dragon. Is your old man okay? If he dies, he dies. Who cares about a maggot in the basement? Just listening to the sporadic conversations outside, Arthur's blood pressure has risen. That's my money, my golden dragon. He shouted silently. Creak, the wooden door trembled and opened, and 2 people walked in, followed by 7 people. Half a day later, the last person came in. After making sure there was no sound outside, Javier ordered the attack. Ouch, the shadow can hit people. I don't owe the casino money. Why would someone come to collect the debt? Master, this night, hit my butt gently. My butthole is still useful. In a few breaths, the 10 defenseless people lay on the ground. Arthur just broke the leg of a spinach monk, and the battle was over. The Lord looked around and finally found John. He was closest to the door, and it seemed that he was the last one to come in. Where are my gold dragons? Arthur asked. John was beaten hard and felt dizzy. He squinted his eyes and looked at him for a long time before he recognized that this was his lord. 7 gods, how did you find this place? John did not answer Arthur's words, but screamed in fear. After giving a look to the soldier beside him, Arthur sat on the chair and watched the soldier hit John hard a few times. Don't hit me, don't hit me, I'll tell you, I'll tell you. After the soldier stopped moving his feet, John took a breath and said, there are some in my shoes and some in my arms. Arthur was furious. Where are the rest? He keenly noticed the problem. Because although the gold dragons are small, hundreds of them together are not small, and there are not many in the shoes and arms. There are only a few dozen. Some of the remaining ones have become gambling debts, some have made my brothers happy, and some I lost last night. Jon answered while groaning. The soldier quickly searched Jon for all the gold royals, about 30 or 40. 700, that's all you have left? How did you spend it? Because of the abundance of resources, the per capita cost of living in the Riverlands is very low. A civilian can fill his stomach with a few copper coins a day. For example, Arthur mobilized more than 3,000 people to work, and they only ate 2 or 3 gold royals a day. This is the amount that Arthur ordered to add chicken and mutton to every meal, in order to make the farmers work harder. More than 600 gold royals. 10 gamblers can't spend them all in nearly a month. Even if they just lost in gambling, they couldn't lose so much. Because the beauty market is a market for civilians, the gambling money can't be too big. If there is really someone who spends a few gold royals, he will be noticed by the owner of the beauty market, the Ward family, immediately. The Ward family is a wealthy knight, loyal to the Tully family, but has a good relationship with the nearby Blackwood family. When such a wealthy person appears in the market, an avarish like Wood will definitely try to curry favor with him. But they were fine here, which meant that their spending did not attract attention. That is, they did not spend much. Search them too. The soldiers received the order and began to search. My lord, we really have no money, just the little that Jon has. You beat Jon. Why did you beat us? The other 9 people did not reveal any useful information. Except for some copper coins, nothing was found. Arthur looked at Jon, who was closest to the door, and suddenly remembered that he was walking at the end just now. There must be something fishy. He asked Jules to take a gambler to the yard, and then started beating him. The screams continued, which was really sad and tearful. When the gambler in the yard was beaten to the point that he could not even make a sound, Arthur carried the man to the wilderness outside the yard. Jules followed him out. It was far enough that the people in the room would definitely not hear what was said. Where is the rest of the money? The gambler's face, which was beaten into a pig's head, showed a trace of surprise, and then immediately pretended to be at a loss. Master, I don't know what you are talking about. I don't need you to tell me. Arthur knew what was going on. Watch him. I'll be back soon. Jon must have hidden the golden dragon. It's hard to say how many people know the location, but others must know that Jon hid the golden dragon. That's enough. P.S. A Game of Thrones joke every day. After the High Sparrow took charge of King's Landing, little Rose Margaerityrell expressed her loyalty to the High Sparrow. Since ancient times, all changes have been achieved through bloodshed. Today, there has been no bloodshed and sacrifice in King's Landing. This is why this change has not succeeded. If there is, please start with Cersei Baratheon. Please recommend on monthly votes. Chapter 37 just didn't pay. There are no sheep near their farm. Arthur was about to leave to torture Jon, but he heard Jules say this. Arthur was puzzled. You might as well make it clearer. Jules showed a look of understanding and smiled greasily. I have made it clear enough. The young lord was stunned and suddenly understood what his uncle meant. It's you who noticed this detail. Sheep is a symbol of evil in the West. The reason is very simple. Some people use sheep to do bad things, and when they are found out, they lie that they were seduced by sheep. So they reached a tacit understanding that sheep are the devil walking in the world. And Jules suddenly mentioned this to make Arthur pay attention to something. Suddenly remembering what the 10 gamblers said outside the house, he had an idea in his mind. Jon is probably a weak man with many tricks. Maybe the other 9 are of the same kind. If Jon's favorite gambler is caught, won't the whereabouts of the golden dragon soon confess? He walked into the farm, entered the room, and began to test. Whoever I point at, I'll drag him out to get beaten. Arthur announced. The spinach monks on the ground immediately shouted. Master, I don't have any money. Stop beating. The money is in Jon's hands. Although Jon was beaten black and blue, he was in good spirits. After a while, Arthur found a clue. Whenever he pointed at 2 people, Jon would make some small movements, such as blinking frequently and swallowing saliva. It's you two. Drag them out and beat them to death, as long as you can't kill them. The 2 soldiers received the order and dragged the 2 designated people out. Arthur moved a chair and sat next to Jon. Where's the money? Where's my gold dragon? Jon rolled his eyes and didn't answer. Soon, a scream of pain that shook the sky rang out outside the house. Jon, I told you, someone is going to die. Master, it was Jon's idea. It has nothing to do with me. Master, it has nothing to do with me. Don't you value our lives? I love you for nothing. Jon could still hold on at first, pretending to be calm, but gradually his expression became tormented and ferocious, as if he was wearing a mask of pain. Until he couldn't bear it anymore. Let them stop, and I'll hand over your golden dragon. The servant's son shouted. After Arthur asked the soldiers to stop, he looked up and said, tell me, where is it? In the cowshed behind the house. There is an empty stone slab, and the golden dragon is hidden under it. Arthur asked Javier and the remaining soldiers to watch over the spinach monks, and he and the two people outside the house went to find the golden dragon. After getting the hint, soon, the golden dragons wrapped in cowhide bags appeared in front of Arthur. And there were some extra gains, leather shoulder pads, exquisite purses, black velvet cloaks and other unrelated carry-on items. You to count them. Soon, the two soldiers counted their own piles, and the total was 655. Adding the more than 30 in the house, the total is more than 680. In other words, this group of gamblers spent nearly 20 gold royals in a month. It only cost 1 gold royal to cultivate land for a young girl. Arthur converted it, and saw 20 young girls in front of him being harassed by these gamblers. He was furious. He had to teach them a lesson. Arthur grabbed a handful of gold royals, and stuffed them into his purse, and threw one to each of the two soldiers. Thank you, Lord Arthur. I will do whatever you want in the future, and I will never say no. They are guest soldiers of Shilly City, and they have to be given some benefits from time to time. Now there are so many gold royals. If Arthur took out a silver deer and threw it to them, and then they went back to tell their companions, I'm afraid that when the war starts, few guest soldiers will be willing to fight for Arthur sincerely. As a lord, in addition to showing his kindness to his subordinates, he must also let them get benefits in a timely manner. Benefits are the most stable glue for power. After letting them hold the cowhide bags and unexpected gains, the three returned to the house. There are a lot of good things. Where did you steal them from? Arthur asked after giving each of the remaining guest soldiers a gold royal. Jon looked at the personal belongings held by the soldier. This is definitely not stolen. Please believe that I just didn't pay, or I haven't paid until now. Ah, you have a lot of problems. Arthur sighed. Instructing your father to steal the Lord's money is disloyalty. Killing others is unkindness. Killing your own father is unfilial. Stealing other people's things is unrighteousness. These 4 are enough to sentence you to death, right? Jon, lying on the ground, was stunned at first, then sneered. You nobles are really hypocritical. Just kill if you want to. Why so much nonsense? His whole body was still in pain and he could hardly move. But when he heard Arthur's hypocritical words, he turned his head and sneered to express his contempt. What? You are not convinced? Doesn't what I said make sense? Jon rolled his eyes. Yes, it makes sense. Your words have your noble logic, but not our common people's logic. Ah, you are a gangster, and you still think you are right. Tell me, what is your common people's logic? If you can sleep with me, I will let you meet the 7 gods with one hammer. Otherwise I will make you lie in bed for 7 days and 7 nights before you die. Arthur said. Jon was jealous and disgusted by the Lord's words. If I had monks as teachers, Grey Robe Amber as coach, the master scholar to treat illness, and the people to help you with work, I could also grow up like you and be envied by others. But I don't have that. I only have a father who lives in the basement and works as a dog for the nobles. Arthur thought for a while and said, even if you are not as good as others, you can't complain about the world like this. Didn't your father try his best to make you a better person? Didn't he ask you to learn from monks and wandering warriors? Cyril didn't ask you to hang out with gamblers. Find a monk to teach me how to lick someone's asshole, and find a wandering warrior to teach me how to stick my ass out, right? That's better. I can't afford it. Jon said sarcastically. The funny thing is that the gambler you despise and look down on in your heart is the best person to me in the whole river, not the monks and wandering warriors. Arthur was a little surprised. It turned out that he had been treated like that since he was a child. No wonder he was like this. But you can't kill your father. He really treats you well. He has a bad life. Why should he impose meaningless efforts on me? It's such a simple truth that salted fish turn over and still salted fish. Doesn't he understand it? Jon said hurriedly, as if he had been holding his breath for a long time. Arthur thought about it, and it was true. There is really no way for civilians in Westeros to be promoted. In peacetime, they are fat sheep for the lords to fleece. The kind that can't run away. After all, other places in the continent are like this, and there is no security guarantee in the eastern continent of Essos. Jon took a break for a while, feeling that the pain in his body was not so great, and slowly said, before you make hypocritical criticisms, you should first see if he has such a superior family conditions as you. Although he didn't hurt anymore, Jon suddenly caught a glimpse of his father's body. The basement servant who wanted his son to be successful was lying in the corner at this moment. Although his eyes were closed, he seemed to still stare at his son. At this moment, the child of someone else's family, the child that his father had always compared with himself, was using their noble thinking to humiliate himself before he died. In the next life, I want to be a father and let Cyril be my son. Let him see how I educate my children. Jon thought so. You'd better let me die quickly and end my miserable life with one hammer, so as not to dirty your eyes and ears. Arthur couldn't think of a way to refute Jon's words, so he raised the sledgehammer and smashed it. The other gamblers were silent. Sir, are you going to kill them? Javier asked. We don't have so many people. Take them back. At least there are 9 adult men who can still move stones. The Lord, who was not in a good mood, ordered this. Thank you for your magnanimity. The 7 gods bless you. The remaining spinach monks expressed their gratitude. The 8 people quickly packed up, put the gamblers who couldn't walk on the ox cart, and took the other gamblers back to the Red Mill. After all, this is the territory of the Ward family, and the territory of Blackwood is not far away. It is not very safe for Arthur to stay here for a long time. Most of the money was recovered, but Arthur did not feel relieved. He is a soul with normal values who has received 9 years of compulsory education. Although he sometimes wants to live out his addiction to being a lord, he has no intention of bullying his subjects as slaves. However, peasants without any way to be promoted are not much different from serfs in nature. Arthur felt that this conflicted with his own thinking, but he was powerless to change it. He was just a small lower level nobleman. How could he change the social form of the entire Westeros continent? What he can do is to better fulfill his lord's obligations and better protect his more than 2,000 subjects. In this way, he will not let down the taxes they pay. P.S. Please recommend on monthly tickets. A joke about Mount Blade every day. Me, I heard that you and Lord Xiaolin are not getting along. Lord Leo Wang, I heard that he is pursuing Ms. Xiao Fang. I'm going to teach him a lesson. Me, I heard that you and Lord Dahui are not getting along. Lord Leo Wang, I heard that he is pursuing Miss Nun. I'm going to teach him a lesson. Me, I heard that you and Lord Paravan are not getting along. Lord Leo Wang, I heard that he is pursuing my wife. I'm going to teach him a lesson. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 38, Sorting Out the Relationships and Events at the Beginning of Game of Thrones. I will immediately enter the main storyline of Game of Thrones. Since there are many characters in the series, and even more in the original novel, some readers may not remember them, so I will post this single chapter. According to the classification of the 9 major families, other important characters are listed later. 1. Dragon Family Targaryen, 2 people in the eastern Essos continent. Dragon Mother Daenerys, the sleeping dragon, also known as the Beggar King. Viserys, 2 people in Westeros, the blind Maester Aemon of the Night's Watch and Jon Snow. Dragon Mother was sold to a Dothraki tribe leader Khal Drogo as his wife, Khaleesi, by Illyrio, the governor of the free trade city of Pentos. This governor title is not very powerful. There are many governors in Pentos who are actually merchants. Dragon Mother missed the days when she lived in the Redgate building in Bravos with William Derry when she was a child. At that time, she and her brother Viserys had servants to serve her and had a stable life. Later, the brother and sister were displaced, but Viserys insisted on instilling the idea of restoring the country and real dragons in Dragon Mother. When the sleeping dragon Viserys was a child, he was very kind to the Dragon Mother. He let her climb into his bed and told her stories about the 7 kingdoms. Later, because the rulers of the major city-states did not like the Targaryen family, the two of them had to wander around. The sleeping dragon also became crazy during this period and was finally killed by the Horse King Khal Drogo in the holy city of the Dothraki. The relationship between the brother and sister is very sad to read from the original book. Here is a statement from the perspective of the Dragon Mother. Let everyone feel it. For so many years, he has been chasing the killer of the usurper, fleeing from one city to another, begging for help from various governors, princes and business tycoons, and even relying on flattery in exchange for food. He must know how they look down on him. No wonder he has become so irritable, so difficult to get close to, and finally driven crazy. The sleeping dragon is also a tragic figure. Everyone is familiar with Jon Snow. To put it simply, he is the nephew of Eddard Stark and the second son of Prince Rhaegar. The eldest son is also called Aegon, who is dead, and there is an imposter in the book. According to the law of succession, he is currently the first heir to the Iron Throne. Dragon Mother is Snow's aunt. Her real aunt, Aemon, the blind maester of the Night's Watch, is much older. He is the third brother of Aegon V. He was elected king in the Great Council of Nobles in 233, but insisted on being a Night's Watcher. Aegon V's nickname is Egg, so he is called Egg by netizens. His son is Jaehaerys II, and his grandson is Mad King Aerys II, the king overthrown by Robert. Snow is the grandson of his nephew's grandson too. Wolf Stark are all in Westeros: Eddard, Benjen, Robb, Rickon, Bran, Sansa, Arya, and Wolf Mother Catelyn. Eddard is not to be mentioned. He is a Duke of Winterfell and the Guardian of the North. His wife Catelyn, the eldest daughter of Duke Hoster of the Tully family, the Guardian of the River, has a friendly relationship with Petyr Baelish, the Littlefinger, and is extremely stupid, selfish and double-standard. Eddard has 3 sons and 2 daughters. The eldest son Robb, the second son Bran was pushed off the tower by Jaime, and the third son Rickon, the Walnut King. The eldest daughter Sansa, extremely obsessed with looks and fickle. The first person she fell in love with in the book was the Night Watcher of the Royce family in the Vale, and she was also the youngest of the 3 Night Watchers who appeared in the TV series, has not seen much of the world, and was fascinated by the colorful world of King's Landing. She was naive in the early stage, but black-bellied in the later stage. Eddard asked the princess's doll craftsman to make a doll for his eldest daughter. At first, Sansa didn't care. Later, the Battle of the Blackwater River, people were in panic, and Sansa ran back to her residence. The first thing she found was this doll, which was still very touching. I laughed when the dog brother Sandor Clegane appeared on the camera in that scene. It's worthy of being my dog brother. It's really funny. The second daughter Arya, my favorite character, with the blood of running wolves, treats people equally, likes adventure, and it was so cool when she killed the Free family in the series. The North will never forget. Robb's motive for sending troops was to let King's Landing release his father and sisters, but later King Joffrey went too far, and the North and Lannister became enemies completely. 3. The Arryn family. This family has the fewest people, and it is simple to say. The death of former Prime Minister Jon Arryn was the reason why Robert went north. Jon Arryn is the adopted father of Robert and Eddard. In order to consolidate the alliance of the 4 families of Wolf, Fish, Eagle and Stag, the old Arryn married Lysa, the second daughter of the Tully family. So he went from being Eddard's adopted father to Eddard's brother-in-law. Everyone has their own opinions. Nothing wrong with it. Jon Arryn doesn't have many scenes, but he is very charismatic. In the book, he even feeds a horse some apples and carrots when it is tired. The person who is most like him in the whole play is his adopted son Eddard. Jon Arryn has a son named Robin Arryn. In the book, he is called Robert to commemorate the king, but Robin is used here to distinguish him. At the beginning of the TV series, Lysa sneaked back to the Eyrie in the Vale with Robin. The biggest source of conflict at the beginning of the Game of Thrones is that Lysa poisoned Jon Arryn to death under the instruction of Littlefinger, and then wrote a letter to her sister to put the blame on Lannister. At the beginning, the Arryns in the Vale were under the control of Lysa. The forces in the Vale can be divided into two types: the pro-war faction headed by Bronze John, the current Earl of the Royce family, the father of the young Night's Watcher at the beginning, and later formed the Alliance of the Righteous. Most of the pro-war nobles have a good relationship with Eddard. If Eddard were alive, this part of the forces might not obey Lyssa's command, and Littlefinger regarded Lyssa and the Vale as his own back garden, so how could Eddard influence them? I will analyze the little tricks of Littlefinger in Eddard's death later. The peace faction is mainly composed of the emerging merchant class and small nobles, and this faction is also the supporter of Littlefinger, or Littlefinger is their spokesperson. 4. The Lion Lannisters, the richest family in the entire continent, known as the head of the family, Duke Tywin, who shits gold. Tywin has 2 sons and 1 daughter, the golden twins Cersei, Jaime, and the little devil Tyrion. Needless to say, Cersei is one of the stupidest women in the whole play, and Robert's death is inseparable from her. She and Jaime gave birth to 3 children, all of whom were born to the cuckolded King Robert. Jaime, the regicide, killed the man who killed the Mad King. I have previously inferred that, based on the tradition of Targaryen brother-sister marriage and Cersei's crazy personality, it is speculated that the 2 are descendants of the Mad King. If true, then Jaime killed his own father with his own hands. Cersei's biggest secret is the matter of the 3 children. In theory, she should have killed Jon Arryn, because the secret of the toughness of the species was discovered by the former Prime Minister, but Littlefinger messed up. I won't say much about the rest of Fenke and Lancel. The imp is one of my favorite characters. He is righteous and resourceful. The part about his trial is simply explosive. The kidnapping of the imp in the early stage was the main reason why the 2 armies of the Westerlands were stationed at the river border and the mountain plundered the Red Fork River. It may be that Martin's early settings were not sufficient. In the book, the villages burned by the mountain were all in the lower reaches of the Red Fork River, that is, near the God's Eye Lake near King's Landing. The mountain must have received orders from Tywin and the Westerlands to do this. There is no reason for him to cross the river to the east to burn a few villages, and then cross the Red Fork River. And there is another problem here. Where did the mountain cross the Red Fork River? If he went to the area surrounded by the Tengstone River, the Red Fork River, and the Blue Fork River, that is, where the protagonist is, the mountain might be blocked, because he had to cross the Tengstone River to reach the Lannister sphere of influence, and that area was where the Tully family's vassal army was concentrated. If he went to the area surrounded by the south bank of the Tengshi River and the Red Fork River, that is, the area where Averin is located, he would be walking into a trap, because the Vance and Piper families in the Riverlands, who are specifically on guard against the Westerlands, have 4,000 troops. Edgemere sent these 4,000 people after the mountain escaped back to the Westerlands, and are gathering to block the Lannister forces from crossing the river. Martin may be like Sheen Alien, who is confused about the direction. 5. Tyrell of the Rose family. The Knight Loras appeared in the early stage, nicknamed the Knight of Flowers, and his sister Margaery, nicknamed the Little Rose. The Knight of Flowers should be the 3 young handsome men in the whole play. The other 2 are Lancel Lannister and Viserys the Sleeping Dragon, weak men with a strong sense of justice, who rushed to go when they heard that the mountain was looting the Red Fork River. At this time, Eddard was stupid. If the Flowers were allowed to participate in the pursuit of the mountain, the Westerlands would automatically become enemies with the Rose family, and there would be no War of the 5 Kings. The political appeal of the Rose family is to marry Little Rose Margaery Tyrell to a king. First, Renly planned to let Little Rose marry Robert, and then Renly went to Margaery himself. Later, Margaery married Joffrey, Tommen, etc. In a word, it doesn't matter who is the county magistrate, Margaery is going to be the county magistrate's wife. This is related to the short history of the Rose family. Like the Free family, they always want to cling to a top noble to enhance their influence. 6. Tully of the Fish family. Hoster, Edgemere, Wolf Mother Catelyn, Eagle Mother Lyssa. 2 silly daughters, a good for nothing son, and a righteous and kind uncle like Blackfish. I really don't know how Hoster educates his children. The conflict between the Fish family and the Riverlands and the Lannisters is that the Wolf Mother kidnapped the little devil. The Riverlands belonged to being pitted by a pig teammate. Of course, Edgemere, the 3 Rivers Arrow God, is also a pig teammate. Although Tywin didn't like this dwarf son very much, he still sent troops for the sake of the family's face. In fact, I feel that the family motto of the Tully family, responsibility, and honor, is more suitable for Old Man Tywin 7. The Baratheon family of the Deer is the current claimant family of the Iron Throne. Robert the Deer died in hunting, and the father-son relationship between him and King Joffrey the Great is worth talking about. Two people who have no blood relationship regard each other as their own sons and fathers, which is really ridiculous. After Robert's death, the War of the Five Kings was basically over, and Joffrey was still proud of Robert's achievements. And he also heard about his uncle and father, but he chose not to believe it. If he really knew the truth, what kind of harm would it cause to the Emperor? Stannis II Deer, the most famous man of the Seven Kingdoms who is ungrateful. There is a very funny paragraph. This man who is famous for his ungratefulness in the Seven Kingdoms shouted, "I'm not a ungrateful person." Political demands: expose the scandals of Cersei and Jaime, and let him inherit the Iron Throne according to the law of inheritance. The Onion Knights under his command are also very interesting, constantly talking nonsense, just and kind. 3 years Renly after Robert's death, his ambition was extremely inflated. He claimed to be king privately. He had the support of the Rose House in the River Reach and the Stormlands. He was the most powerful party before his death. He was killed by Stannis' shadow, not Stannis' child. 8. Dawn. There is nothing much to say. There are basically no people who appeared in the early stage. Prince Aber in the Red VIP is still wandering. People on the seaside are particular. They don't even need to row a boat when they go out to mix. They just rely on the waves. 9. Iron Island's King Balon's 2 sons died in the Stark family, and the 3rd son Theon was raised as a hostage by the Starks. After the Wolf family released Theon, King Balon decided to send troops to retaliate against the North. Theon is also one of the most miserable people in the Game of Thrones world. He has experienced the best hostage treatment and the worst hostage treatment. Of course, Theon is also the most successfully created character in the series in my opinion. He is one of the few people in the TV series who has not collapsed his character setting. 10. Everyone in the Royal Council. Eunuch Varys, the head of intelligence. Don't be confused by the series. Varys has always been biased towards the dragon family. Judging from the fact that his life force can drive dark magic, he must be of the dragon family. He himself knows this, so he planned to cause chaos in Westeros from the beginning. Judging from the conversation between him and Illyrio that I heard, he and this governor of Pentos have been planning to use the power of Khal Drogo and the Golden Company to counterattack Westeros. The previous leader of the Golden Company was the Blackfy family, a bastard branch of the Dragon family. After the Dragon family lost power, the Golden Company leaned towards the Dragon family. He did not participate in the death of Jon Arryn, but he must have known about it. Littlefinger, Petyr Baelish, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He has a characteristic, that is, he never speaks the truth. I mentioned earlier that Eddard has a huge influence on the Vale, and if Eddard is alive, the general framework of the alliance of the 4 families of Wolf, Fish, Hawk and Stag will be there. The North plus the Riverlands plus half of the Vale, plus Dragonstone, plus the Iron Islands, and some of the Lords of the Stormlands, can definitely defeat the Lannisters. As for the Rose family, they are strong enough, but not influential enough. They have always been on the same side, and never stepped forward. If Eddard was there, Renly would probably wait and see before deciding whether to become king. At that time, most of the 4 alliances would fight in the west, which is far from the chaos of the War of the Five Kings. How could Littlefinger allow such a huge change? So even if King Joffrey didn't kill Eddard, Eddard would definitely die on the way back to the north. Coincidentally, if Joffrey didn't kill Eddard, then according to Cersei's plan, Eddard would put on black clothes and become a night watchman. Among the night watchmen in this line, there happened to be a top killer, Jaqen the Faceless. Considering that Littlefinger tried his best to prevent Robert from using the Faceless Man to assassinate Daenerys at the royal meeting before, there is a way. As for the lack of money that Littlefinger said, that's bullshit. In 15 years, he spent 6 million gold dragons plus the savings left by the Mad King Aerys second to hire a Faceless Man. How much more can it be than this? You know, if Daenerys' child is born, it will really threaten the rule of the Baratheon dynasty. So, I judge that Jaqen is Littlefinger's backup to kill Eddard. What's more, there is a bit of personal grudge here. Catelyn is Littlefinger's first love. Grand Maester Pycelle. There is no doubt that he is from the Lannister family of Lion. He suggested to the Mad King to open the gate of King's Landing and let the Lion's army enter the city. 11. Finally, the death of Jon Arryn was poisoned by Lysa, the wife of the former Prime Minister. Littlefinger gave the order and Lysa executed it. I guess the Lion family and Varys and other dragon family members know this process, but no one said it. But what is very strange is the death of Suffolk, a servant of the Eagle family. It was Lysa who poisoned, and Suffolk was not suspected, but he was still stabbed to death by the Mountain at the tournament. This is definitely not a coincidence. The biggest possibility is that Suffolk knew about Lysa's poisoning and was bribed by Littlefinger to keep his mouth shut. But with Littlefinger's intelligence, it is impossible for him to only make this move. If the Lion and Wolf families don't fight, Westeros won't be in chaos. So Shufu is the key to accusing the Lion family of poisoning Jon Arryn. The Lion family also vaguely knew about Littlefinger's move, so they killed Shufu directly and left no evidence. Of course, Cersei doesn't have this intelligence, but Old Man Pycelle may be. Among the three major players in the game of power in King's Landing, the Lion family, Littlefinger, and Dragon family varies. Littlefinger is the most active. The rest of the Deer family, Eagle family, Wolf family, and Rose family are the objects of playing King's Landing. A series of events in the early stage were basically promoted by Littlefinger. Although Littlefinger was well prepared, he was not half as smart as King Joffrey. He directly beheaded Eddard, resulting in Jaqen's backhand not being used. This also makes Jaqen's appearance in the Black Team seem inexplicable. The above is all based on my memory. If there is anything wrong, please point it out in time. PS. Since I have written so many words, could you please support me by giving me a recommendation ticket or a monthly ticket? Thank you very much. Chapter 39. I'll eat the lamb chops. Baron, Arthur Braykin level 5 experience. 3265/4000 strength. 17 agility. 12 intelligence. 7 charm. 9 skills. Iron Bones 4. Power attack 7. Power throw 1. Power bow 1. Weapon mastery 2. Shield defense 0. Run 2. Riding 4. Horse archery 0. Looting 0. Coach 0. Tracking 0. Tactics 1. Guide 0. Scouting 0. Healing 0. Surgery 0. First aid 0. Engineering 0. Persuasion 1. Prisoner management 1. Leadership 3. Trading 0. Weapon proficiency. One-handed weapons 74. Two-handed weapons 125. Pallium 77. Bows 31. Crossbows 31. Throwing 31. The experience gained from the quest to find Cyril brought him to level 5. The attribute points gained from the upgrade continued to be added to agility, to skill points, 1 for prisoner management, and 1 for run, and weapon points continued to be added to two-handed weapons. After adding points proficiently, Arthur put away the panel. The strength has reached 17. According to Arthur's experience, almost no ordinary person can resist his great strength. In other words, Arthur's strength is enough to reach the level of the famous knights in Westeros. But there may still be a gap from the Magic Mountain. In short, he has to keep improving. The good news is that the training of Arthur's troops will also bring him experience, so the speed of upgrading will be faster. It was already noon, and the group found an inn and prepared to eat. The 9 gamblers also came in with their hands tied, and the horses and ox carts were fed with grass by the store. If a few more copper coins were given, the store would be happy to add some soybeans, wheat, corn, soybeans and other concentrated feed to the grass. The products of the riverland are so abundant that cattle, horses and other livestock can eat better. Arthur threw 10 copper coins to the waiter and asked them to serve their mounts. The waiter took it quickly and said that he would go out to add concentrated feed later. With his eyes that had seen all kinds of people, he could naturally see that these were the elite soldiers of Stonefence City. The horses outside were definitely not skinny horses for plowing, but fat war horses. Such guests must be served well. Since it was a small inn in the countryside, they could not serve whatever they ordered, but had to look at the inn's menu today. The best food was roasted lamb chops with black pepper. There were 8 portions marked on the menu board, just enough for 8 people. The staple food was vermicelli with green sauce, 1 portion for each of the gamblers and soldiers. Madam, 8 portions of roasted lamb chops with black pepper, 17 portions of vermicelli with green sauce. Soldiers have big appetites, so it is normal to order 1 more portion of vermicelli. The gamblers were captives, so they could not eat good things like roasted lamb chops. It was Arthur's kindness to give them vermicelli with green sauce. Okay, sir, wait a moment. The proprietress replied cheerfully. Arthur's tall and handsome appearance showed that he was the son of a great nobleman, and the fully armored soldiers around him further proved the proprietress's judgment. Originally, such noble children rarely came to her interest. However, due to the recent rumors that the king is about to hold a grand tournament for his new prime minister, and the prize money for the champion is as high as tens of thousands of gold dragons, many wandering warriors and free riders went to King's Landing to try their luck. Of course, there are also bards, female workers, and thieves and vendors who follow. There are also many noble children, so the proprietress is not surprised. This is why there are luxurious foods such as grilled lamb chops these days. Usually, she has to worry about not being able to sell out the chicken in the store, but these days she doesn't have to worry about business at all. Of course, the 9 gangster-like people with their hands tied were selectively ignored by her. The affairs of the nobles are not for the common people to ask. Even if there are strange habits, it's up to the masters, as long as it doesn't affect themselves. Wait, leave the black pepper grilled lamb chops for us. Let them eat the noodles. The proprietress just turned around when a voice came from the door of the store. She turned around and found 5 or 6 people walking in. The leader was wearing a light yellow silk shirt and pants, with the same color boots on his feet and a knight's sword on his waist. He looked like a real rich noble. Compared with the tall and handsome man who asked for lamb chops before, this one looked like he had a higher rank. But, sir, this lord came first. She didn't dare to agree to this man, nor did she dare to refuse openly. Both sides were nobles, and she couldn't afford to offend either. Just serve me the lamb chops. Don't worry about anything else. In the Riverlands, anyone who sees my purple background and silver eagle logo will choose to bow to me. The proprietress had no choice. The nobles here were more stubborn. She had to run to Arthur, who was already seated, and asked, "Sir, the lord over there wants to eat lamb chops. Can you please give way?" Arthur had already noticed the man in bright yellow clothes. Seeing him so arrogant, he couldn't help but sneer. "I came here first and ordered the lamb chops first. How can I give way? Go tell him that I'm going to eat this lamb chops." The man in bright yellow clothes also heard what was said here, and his attitude became even tougher. "Go tell this little noble who came from an unknown village that I, Patrick, don't care about these things. The lamb chops must go into my mouth." Both of them could hear each other's words, but they had to use the proprietress as a middleman to pass the message. This scene seemed a bit funny and childish. Arthur was about to respond again, but Javier, who was sitting next to him, whispered to him, "This should be Patrick Mallister, the heir of Seaside City. It is said that they are proud and arrogant. Don't offend them." Arthur turned his head and looked Javier up and down. "I didn't expect you to be such a person." "We are right. Why are you afraid?" He was going to eat this lamb chop today, and no one could help. It was not in Arthur's character to ask the proprietress to pass the message. There was no point in making things difficult for a commoner. He turned around and stared at this young master. "Patrick, you'd better not make me angry. The grilled lamb chops are ours." As he said that, he touched his sledgehammer. If the young man didn't give in, he would give them a severe lesson. Patrick stood up, and Arthur thought he was going to fight, so he held the sledgehammer in his hand and slowly raised it. Unexpectedly, Patrick just opened his mouth and looked straight at Arthur's face. This look made him very uncomfortable, but also a little familiar. Thinking carefully, he had this feeling in the eyes of the 9 gamblers. He looked at me, but didn't say anything. What does that mean? Arthur didn't know what to do, and asked the people around him. Joel smiled greasily. "Isn't it obvious? You are attracted to each other." Arthur's uncle's smile made him feel goosebumps all over. Because in the morning, Joel's had this kind of smile when he reminded him about the sheep. This is definitely not a good thing. Javier also said to Arthur, "You should have confidence in your appearance. This is a face that neither men nor women can resist. PS. New author and new book. Please recommend. Monthly votes and support." Chapter 40 Desmond is coming. The final result was that Arthur's side ate all the lamb chops, while the 6 people from the Mellister family ordered inferior boiled chicken. After seeing Arthur's handsomeness, Patrick took the initiative to make concessions and apologize. What Arthur didn't expect was that the so-called arrogant heir to the sea frontier city actually ran to his table to eat together. "We are all from the Riverlands, and it is only right to get to know each other." This is what Patrick said. Compared with when he entered the door, his attitude took a 180-degree turn. Of course, Arthur ignored him. A dog with good looks is not a good thing. If he didn't have a handsome face, I'm afraid he would have to fight today. Look at this temperament and demeanor. It's like a noble from the direct line of Stonefence City. After the meal, Patrick praised him even more, as if Arthur was as noble as Janice's own son. "Stay away from me." Arthur glanced at him. Of course, the original intention of the Lord of the Moulin Rouge was to deter, and what Patrick realized was, "You can follow me." After paying the landlady 2 silver deer, Arthur insisted on asking for change. He wasn't stingy to that extent, but he felt uncomfortable when he remembered that the landlady had come to him and asked if he could make concessions. It was as if I looked easy to bully. After the 17 people rested, they set out again. If they hurried, they could go home at some point between dusk and midnight. But there were obviously 6 more companions on the road. Patrick and his servants. Since it was not Arthur's territory, he couldn't drive away the noble who had stuck to him. Let's speed up and get rid of them. After being annoyed by the sticky candy of Heijiang City, Arthur made the right decision. Why get rid of us? I wanted to ask you to go to the tournament together. You know, it's the tournament of the new Prime Minister Duke edition. Given the relationship between the king and him, this tournament will definitely be more interesting than the Prince's Name Day tournament, and the prize money will be higher. Patrick drove the horse beside him, chattering. Arthur knew that the Prince's Naming Day tournament he was talking about was the tournament of Prince Joffrey that had just passed. The naming day was the birthday, because according to the custom of the Andals, one must have a name when born. In contrast, there would be no naming on the day of the wildling's birth. Of course, Arthur knew about Eddard's tournament. In fact, based on his understanding of Game of Thrones, he even remembered that the Hound Sandor Clegane won the championship and received a reward of 40,000 gold dragons, and the runner-up also received 20,000 gold dragons. The champion of the group close combat also received 20,000 gold dragons, and the champion of the archery received 10,000 gold dragons, a total of 90,000 gold dragons in prize money. Wait, prize money? Arthur actually forgot about this. Except for the 20,000 gold dragons that the runner-up could not get, the remaining 70,000 gold dragons could be taken by one person. It was not his fault that he had a bad memory, but most of the nobles around the north bank of the Red Fork River did not associate with Arthur, and Earl Janis of Stonehenge City did not go to such a meeting. Henry was not in the same social circle as him, so he was not very well informed. Arthur didn't keep ravens, so the news came only by word of mouth. If he could get these 70,000 gold dragons, armor and weapons would still be a problem. Even if King's Landing had a set of custom-made large plate armor, it would be enough to buy thousands of sets. At that time, the masters in the blacksmith shop would have to worry about it. They had to worry about whether they could meet Arthur's needs. Now Arthur only had to worry about one problem: what would happen to Blackwood's revenge after he left? Without him, Amber's militia and Harville's 100 men alone could not stop the revenge of an earldom. If he was there, at least he could kill the general in the battle, and then hammer a kid like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. The heart that had just been ignited suddenly turned cold. Are you going to participate in the tournament in King's Landing? Arthur looked at the heir of Sea Frontier City who was following him and asked. Of course not. I know my own strengths and weaknesses, and I just went there to watch the excitement. Sea Frontier City is too boring. Patrick was very honest and spoke his mind neatly. I would like to attend, but I have something to do in the territory and I can't get away. Hey, what can happen in your little territory? Come with me, let's go and see the excitement. This may be the only time in a lifetime They had introduced themselves to each other before, and they knew each other's details. Patrick heard Arthur's participation, but he didn't mock him, although he thought that with this Arthur, it is more likely to win the championship in the most handsome face competition, rather than the lance duel. It's true that there is something. Arthur didn't tell Patrick about his concerns. They just met for a while, and some things were not easy to tell him. Besides, even if he told him, Patrick was unlikely to believe that Arthur could kill the enemy's main general and beat down dozens or hundreds of enemy soldiers. Then can you invite me to your castle? As a friend, I think this is a necessary way to enhance friendship. Arthur glanced at Patrick, who was smiling at him, and reluctantly agreed. In the absence of a conflict of interest, it is not a bad thing to have a good relationship with such an earl's heir. You can go, but I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Patrick was very happy, and he kept telling Arthur some rumors about King's Landing, although he had also heard about them. After a whole afternoon of running, the gamblers' legs were weak, and they finally returned to the Moulin Rouge before it was completely dark. Gods of the Seven, what are you doing? Building the largest castle in the Riverlands? No wonder you said you couldn't leave because of something. Patrick and his 5 followers were shocked by the scene they saw. It's just a defensive village, not a solid castle. Arthur explained. It's so big. How many people do you want to accommodate? I'm afraid your subjects won't be able to fill it up. Patrick was amazed. Then you underestimate my territory. This village is prepared for them. They passed through various building materials and tents that were randomly placed. It seems that there are many people who can work in your territory. I just hired some men from the Stonehead City territory. It can't be said to be hiring, because I don't need to pay them. The benefit that Janis gave to Arthur was that the 2,000 people did not need to be paid, because this was an order issued by the Earl. It was similar to Corvée. Patrick was very interested in Arthur's move to build a stockade. When he learned about the conflict between Arthur and Blackwood a month ago, he had a better impression of Arthur. Anyone who hears about this will support you. Murderers must be punished, and justice always overwhelms darkness. The two chatted, and rode closer to the family castle. Umber came out with a few servants to greet him. He brought a message. My lord, the coach of Riverrun, said Esmond Grell, is here. P.S. Please recommend and vote for the monthly ticket. A Game of Thrones joke every day. Jon Snow, as the nephew of Duke Eddard and a nominal illegitimate child, when outsiders praised him for being like his father, he actually looked like his mother. When outsiders praised him for being like his mother, Snow actually looked like his father. Chapter 41 Leaving home. Bring me some goose meat, I'm craving that. Patrick shouted as soon as he sat down in the hall. Goose is the favorite meat of the nobles due to its high fat content. Pork is not very popular among the nobles, because it is easy to get sick after eating it. Bring him some pickled fish. Arthur ordered Amber. Ignoring Patrick's reaction, he turned to Desmond and asked, I don't know the purpose of your visit to my castle yet. Although he didn't know why the heir of Sealand City was mixed up with Arthur, a small noble, Desmond still honestly stated his purpose. So I hope to go to King's Landing with you to participate in the tournament. This is a letter written by Lord Edgemure in the name of the Warden of the Rivers. Edgemure presided over the affairs of the Tully family, but he was not the Duke of Riverrun yet, so he could only give orders in the name of his father. The heir of Riverrun didn't want to go to King's Landing himself. First, his martial arts skills were weak, and second, his father, Duke Hoster, was ill and he had to accompany him. Desmond handed the wax-sealed paper to Arthur. The battle nearly 20 days ago had left a deep impression on him, so much so that, after getting Edgemure's permission to participate in the tournament, he pestered Edgemure to write this letter. Arthur took it, peeled off the trout wax seal, and read it carefully. The letter was not long. The main content was that he was allowed to participate in the new Prime Minister's tournament in the name of the feudal lord. When he was away, the territory would be protected by the Tully family. Any attack on the 9 villages near the Moulin Rouge during this period would be regarded as an attack on the Tully family. You should go with me. We may not have a share in the lance competition, but there is still hope for the group battle and archery competition. Desmond said carelessly. According to convention, there are 3 events in the tournament: lance, archery, and group battle. Lance is the favorite competition of all kinds of knights. From the King's Good to wealthy property knights, to wandering knights, and even warriors without the title of knight. They all want to become famous in the lance competition. Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, became famous in the Seven Kingdoms for defeating the Kingsguard and Kingslayer Jaime Lannister with one spear at the tourney on Joffrey's name day. Arthur was amused when he thought of this. On his son's name day, the father was defeated by a 17-year-old boy with one spear. As for the archery competition and the team battle, anyone can participate. If Arthur remembered correctly, the champion of the team battle this time was Thoros, the Red Monk from the This man is a preacher of the Lord of Light. Of course, judging by his behavior, he is a flower monk with an unpious faith. He is also a Malay wizard. He folded the letter and put it on the table. Patrick was not upset about eating the goose. He smiled and said, "Go ahead, Edgemure has promised you. What else do you have to worry about? This letter comes at the right time. Of course I will go." Arthur made up his mind. With the promise of the Tullys, Raventree would not dare to make any small moves. He could leave without any worries and go to King's Landing to participate in the tournament. He must win the 3 championships and get the 70,000 gold dragons prize so that he can have the capital to carve out a place in the subsequent war. With your hammer, I think the team championship is already in our pocket. Desmond had seen Arthur's hammer and knew how powerful such a powerful armor-piercing weapon was in a melee. 1 hammer knocked him down, and 2 hammers saw the 7 gods. Arthur shook his head slightly. "I think this hammer is too light. When I go to King's Landing, I'm going to make a bigger 2-handed hammer, the size of a pumpkin." Desmond opened his eyes wide, feeling incredible. "How strong are you? Pumpkin hammer, who can withstand such a hammer?" Patrick had never seen Arthur hit a child with a hammer, and felt that the conversation between the two was inexplicable. "What pumpkin hammer? What are you talking about?" Desmond introduced him. "Mr. Arthur is going to make a pumpkin-sized hammer as his weapon." Patrick laughed when he heard this. "You southerners talk interestingly. I don't think even the mountain can swing a pumpkin-sized hammer. Heijiang City belongs to the north in the Riverlands, so naturally people along the Red Fork River are called southerners. But Mr. Arthur can dance." Desmond chose to believe the Lord of the Red Mill. Patrick shook his head and laughed, treating it as a joke between the two. Arthur didn't want to force him to convince him, so he started a conversation about other things. People always believe what they want to believe. Before Patrick saw his divine power, no matter how many words he said, it was useless. Soon, dinner was served. After the 3 of them and their followers had dinner, they went to rest. The castle was small, so Patrick and Desmond could sleep in the guest room, and the followers could only sleep outside the castle. Fortunately, there were enough tents to accommodate them. The next morning, in the hall. "You must build this kind of spear. Go buy some farm tools and melt them down to make the spearhead yourself. In addition, you must build more large shields. After the village is built, all adult men will gather together and participate in military training. The war is coming, and they must also be prepared." Arthur repeated his orders several times, and Amber wrote them down on paper. He had already ordered Amber and Benji, a maester from Allen City, to preside over the construction of the village and the manufacture of weapons and armor, and Harville, an officer of the Stonehenge City Defense Force, to be responsible for training the militia. With the guarantee of the Tully family, Blackwood was no longer a problem. After the village was formed, his subjects would be much safer, and there would be no worries about going there. This trip would take at least a month, so it would not be wrong to give more detailed instructions. After the steady and mature Desmond expressed his boredom, Arthur finally decided to leave. He left 500 gold royals for daily expenses of the project. If it was not enough, he would write an IOU and wait for him to come back. Like Patrick, Arthur also brought 4 followers: Jules, the soldier Pipe, the personal servant Medon, and the stable boy Barton. Of course, this stable boy was not a boy, he was an adult. Arthur's team of 5, Patrick's team of 6, Desmond's team of 9, a total of 20 people, set off. Many years later, when the reputation of King of Benevolence Arthur Braykin resounded throughout Westeros, people always liked to talk about when Arthur started his journey to become king. And most people believed that it was his trip to King's Landing that set him on the road to dominance. From the last Hearth to Dawn, his notoriety was known to everyone. From Lannisport to Dragonstone, his evil deeds were known to everyone. The enemies would tremble when they heard his name, and his people were proud of Arthur because he was their king. P.S. Please recommend and vote for me. Chapter 42, Harrenhal. This is Harrenhal, the largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms. Patrick introduced it to Arthur in a boastful manner. Of course Arthur knew this. According to the original work of Game of Thrones, Harrenhal belongs to the House of Harrenhal, and was occupied by Tywin for a long time during the War of the Five Kings. Sterling, the chief officer of the Gold Cloaks in King's Landing, obtained this castle because of his meritorious service in arresting Eddard, but was then ruthlessly deprived of it by the Little Devil. Since Harrenhal's fiefdom is vast and rich, its owners are often the most powerful princes in the Riverlands. But due to the legendary curse of Harrenhal, the family that rules Harrenhal will slowly decline after its prosperity. Its sixth owner, the House of Harrenhal, is also the same. In the spring of 281 AD, Earl Walter Harrenhal held a grand tournament, and Prince Rhaegar defeated everyone, and won the championship. Of course, this was only when the fearless Barristan Selmy, a member of the King's Guard during the Mad King's time, and now as King Robert, gave in a little. The young prince had such glory. Then, a mistake happened. Prince Rhaegar hooked up with Eddard's sister and Robert's fiancée Lyanna Stark, and then took her to his wife's family, Dorne, to live happily. Eddard's father and brother went to King's Landing to ask the Mad King for an explanation, but one was burned to death and the other was strangled to death. The Mad King then ordered Jon Arryn, the Lord of the Vale, to kill his adopted son Robert to prevent future troubles. But the Arryn family, whose family language is high as glory, is not a coward. In order to keep his oath, to protect his adopted son, Jon Arryn rebelled. With the cooperation of Hoster Tully, the four-family alliance of wolf, fish, eagle and deer was officially established. In 282, the War of the Usurper broke out. 2 years later, Robert became king, and the Baratheon dynasty was established. 15 years later, Arthur, Patrick, Desmond and his followers came here. Although the River House has declined, it is under the jurisdiction of the earldom after all, so it is not a problem to entertain us. Desmond said. Given their status, the Heen family was naturally happy to receive them, but Arthur's status was not in the eyes of the great nobles. He was able to stay here because of the two of them. I need to take a good bath, change into clean clothes, and shave my beard. I will meet many nobles on the road in the future, so I must look good. Patrick muttered to himself. Although he is the heir to the earldom in the Sea City, he is not a big shot in King's Landing. Now it is the Deer dynasty, and the queen is from the Lion family, so people from Stormland and the Westerly are calling the shots in King's Landing. Arthur didn't care much about this kind of thing. They won't stare at you like they stare at a woman. Why do they care about these things? Patrick curled his lips and said with a little sourness, for a look like yours, if it's more refined, you are handsome and dignified. If it's more sloppy, you are unrestrained and free and easy. How can you understand my distress? Arthur ignored him and rode his horse to observe. If I remember correctly, Harrenhal is one of the 3 key defense locations in the Riverlands. The other 2 are the twins on the upper reaches of the Green Fork and Riverrun on the upper reaches of the Red Fork. The 3 formed a stable triangle, and together with the Trident and its tributaries, formed the Riverlands defense system. As long as these 3 were in hand, the Rivermen were powerful enough to keep the enemy out. In the early days of the War of the Five Kings, one of the reasons why Edmure failed to deal with the Lannister army was that he gave up Harrenhal. By giving up this, Tywin was able to gallop across the vast plains from the south bank of the Red Fork and the north of the Blackwater River, from Pink City to Maidenpool. He crossed the river when he wanted to, and plundered the civilian villages to replenish military supplies when he wanted to, without any consideration. If Harrenhal had a certain number of troops to guard it, the Riverlands would not have been so passive in the early days. You know, the strength of the Riverland lords is not weak. The total number of soldiers from each family is more than 30,000, plus the conscripted peasant soldiers. They still have a great advantage in terms of military strength. But Edmure was stunned. He first sent 4,000 men from the Vance and Piper families to attack the Golden Tooth, an important place in the west. He gave up the areas around God's Eye Lake and Maidenpool, and concentrated his forces on Riverrun and the Westerly army led by Jaime. In the end, he was captured. If it weren't for Lord Titus of Blackwood who tried his best to rescue Edgemere, it would be even more difficult to fight the Battle of the Whispering Wood after Robb arrived with the Northern cavalry. Since Arthur decided to fight against the alliance of the Hirennel and Wolf families, such mistakes would naturally not happen again. The triangle defense system with Hirennel, Reveron and the twins as the fulcrum must not fail. Next to him was Desmond Grell, the coach of Reveron, whose ideas were enough to influence Edgemere. Arthur felt that he should instill some ideas in him. Lord Desmond, what do you think is the most important fortress in the Riverlands that cannot be lost if a war breaks out? Desmond was stunned, not understanding why the Hammer God asked him this question, but he quickly answered, no need to think about it, it must be Reveron. As long as the Westerlers are stopped at the intersection of the Tendeston River and the Red Fork River, what other enemies can enter the Riverlands? The North and the Vale are both staunch allies. Arthur's face was full of black lines. As expected, people from Reveron only think about Reveron. If this imaginary enemy, the Lannister army, starts from the Golden Road, crosses the Blackwater River and goes north, can Reveron still stop it? Like the River Road and the King's Road, the Golden Road is also one of the 5 roads built by Jeharizi. It starts from Casterly Rock in the west and ends at King's Landing on the winter solstice, stretching across the southern edge of the Riverlands. Desmond was shocked. Then King Robert will have to order the mobilization of the entire nation's army to defeat the Lannister army. He also knew that once they reached the large plains on the north bank of the Blackwater River and the south bank of the Trident, only an absolute advantage in force could win. That's not what I meant. If only the Riverlands and the Westerlers were fighting, how would we deal with the 20,000 or 30,000 troops coming from the Golden Road? Desmond shook his head. That's not something I can consider. The Duke and Edgemere will come up with a suitable solution. In this case, the only way to break the impasse is to hold on to Hirennel. Arthur gave a direct answer. Patrick urged his horse and caught up to join their conversation. I think Arthur is right. The only solution is for the Tullys to send troops to defend Hirennel. Desmond was puzzled. Why can't the Millisters defend the city themselves? This is not the business of the Millisters. Arthur raised his whip. As long as Hirennel is in hand, the Lannister army can't be arbitrarily mobilized in the vast land near God's Eye Lake, because Hirennel can send troops to cut off their food supply at any time. Desmond's eyes were still confused, but he still made a no sound, pretending that he understood. Arthur ignored him and turned to talk about this with Patrick. The Millisters of Sealand can also influence Edgemere's command, so it's good to let Patrick have this awareness. P.S. Please recommend on monthly votes. Chapter 43, Eliminating Wild Boars. Are you all going to King's Landing to participate in the tournament? Lady Heen asked coldly as she sat on the main seat. The din hall, the flickering candlelight, the old and weak servants, and the listless countess were all that was shown to Arthur and his party. After the death of Earl Walter Heen and his 4 sons, Lady Heen had always lived in seclusion and had basically no contact with outsiders. There were no other members of the Heen family, only a few distant relatives. In fact, because their mother Minissa came from the Heen family, Edgemere, Catelyn, and Lyssa were the first heirs to the largest castle in the 7 kingdoms. Yes, Desmond replied. But Patrick obviously disagreed. Not entirely, I just went to see it. Anyway, you are all going to King's Landing. I haven't been there for a long time. Lady Heen sighed. Arthur slandered in his heart. You don't even go out of Hirennel much. How can you get to King's Landing? After Patrick introduced their journey from landing at the lower reaches of the Red Fork River, riding forward and heading south to reach here, Lady Heen generously asked the butler to prepare a sumptuous dinner for them. I knew that coming here was the right choice, Patrick said with a smile. He could finally eat the goose meat he had been longing for. Arthur was also very happy. The life on horseback for a few days was really tiring, and the food along the way was not very satisfactory. Now he could have a good rest. In order to avoid the crowds on the King's Road, they specially chose the road on the west side to move forward, but due to the small number of inns and the few castles of nobles along the way, their life was a little more difficult. Finally, after a few days of running around, the group arrived here. Hirennel is large enough to accommodate Tywin's 20,000 troops, but it is obvious that the Heen family does not use many areas at the moment. According to rumors, Lady Heen and her servants only move in some areas on the 3 lower floors of Harrenhal, and other places are deserted. According to Arthur's observation, there should be less than 100 living people in the castle at the moment. Considering that there were soldiers, the number of servants was not in line with the earldom. Desmond was much older than his companions. After carefully observing the unfortunate countess, he raised his doubts. "You seem to be troubled by something. Can my companions and I help you solve your worries? It's not a big deal, so we won't bother you. Just have dinner and go to bed early." Lady Heen was very polite. Her butler walked in at this moment. "It's just a few wild boars, but they are running rampant in the castle and causing some injuries. If these gentlemen are willing to help, we will have much less trouble." Patrick was very surprised and exclaimed, "How can wild boars get into the castle? Where are your guards? The population near the God's Eye Lake is so dense, how can wild boars run alive?" He asked a series of questions, and his relaxed tone even made the dim candle light in the hall cheerful. Arthur was not surprised by this. In his previous life, Jinling, a huge city with a population of millions, wild boars still raged. The old steward replied politely, "Harrenhal is so big that our dozens of guards cannot defend it completely. Fortunately, wild boars rarely come to the places where people live in the castle. As for how they escape human hunting, I also want to know." The steward told the hidden truth, but Lady Heen did not agree to let the guests help. Although Desmond and Arthur also wanted to help, the host disagreed, and the scene was temporarily awkward. Task: help Harrenhal eliminate the wild boars. The blue light screen appeared at the right time, and Arthur decided to help. "Let's try it. I heard from the steward that someone in the castle has been injured. If it is delayed any longer, there will be greater harm," he said in a firm tone. The steward looked at Arthur with praise, and liked his statement. Of course, he also complained about the lady's pedantry in his heart. The family has reached the point where they can't even deal with the wild boars that broke into the house, and they still put on the airs of the Earl family and don't let the enthusiastic guests do any work. It's really a face-saving thing. Seeing that everyone present disagreed with her, Madame Heen was silent for a long time, then nodded and acquiesced to this matter. "Great, we will get rid of these scourges tomorrow," Patrick shouted loudly, acting as if he was the main person pushing this matter. Arthur didn't care about the heir of Heijiang City who was in the limelight, because the dinner was served by the servants. The living room was large enough, and more than a dozen followers ate with them at other tables. After expressing her apologies for not being able to accompany them, the countess left, and the steward accompanied them to feast. After finishing 3 pieces of charcoal grilled steaks, a dish of foie gras, 2 fat chicken legs, and 7 or 8 glasses of cider, Arthur touched his stomach and went to the guest room arranged for him. The rest of the people also rested. The next morning, the armory. "You can choose these armors and weapons," the steward Richard said loudly. Arthur and the others were not polite, and they tried them directly. Wild boars are not easy animals to deal with. As the old saying goes, 1 pig, 2 bears, and 3 tigers. This is not to say that wild boars are stronger than bears or tigers, but that they can cause more harm to humans than the other two. Among the 20 people, excluding the stable boys and servants, there are 12 warriors, plus a dozen ordinary soldiers from the Heen family, a total of 30 people. It is still easy to deal with a few wild boars. After shooting with a strong crossbow and avoiding the pig's sudden advance, use a broadsword or a spear to attack the pig's sides. Arthur also chose a set of black iron armor and put it on. The armor he wore before was a set of chainmail given by the Lord of Bracken. The original owner had a beautiful set of plate armor, but it was destroyed in the second battle at the Stonehenge City Arena. This time when he went to King's Landing, he did not bring that set of chainmail, so now he needs a set of sturdy armor. "This plate armor is so beautiful, it fits me so well." Joel's voice floated into Arthur's ears. He looked back and saw that his uncle had put on a set of silver armor without any hesitation. "You still have to return it, don't damage it." Joel's touched the armor happily. I know. Don't forget the set you promised me. I will take it after I go to King's Landing." Arthur nodded. He now had more than 2,000 gold royals in his hand, so there was no pressure to buy several sets of customized armor. Then, the Heen soldiers gave each of them a pair of rocket capstan crossbows. The biggest advantage of this crossbow is that it saves effort. Even King Joffrey can easily load arrows, which shows that the threshold for its use is low. Seeing that everyone was ready, the butler Richard walked in front of Desmond and said, "The task of eliminating the wild boar is left to you." Arthur was happy. He was obviously the strongest fighter in the field, but Richard found Desmond directly. He really didn't have good eyesight. Desmond also knew that he was not as good as the Lord of the Moulin Rouge, that Mr. Arthur is stronger. You should let him lead the team. Richard turned his head and looked at Arthur. He felt that this handsome young man was tall enough, but not strong. He shook his head and said, "You should do it. P.S. Please recommend on monthly votes." Chapter 44. Mrs. Heen's thank you gift. At the insistence of the butler Richard, Desmond reluctantly became the commander. Arthur had no objection. Anyway, he was not a good commander, and the original owner had not received relevant education. Rash command would only ruin things. Led by several Heen soldiers who were familiar with the terrain and the situation of the wild boars, nearly 30 soldiers set out and headed towards their destination. Ironhill is indeed the largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms. After walking a long way, they were still inside the stone building. The surroundings were quite quiet, and the sound of more than 20 people's leather boots colliding with the road was the main source of sound. The road was covered with moss and unknown weeds, because no one was walking, and the sun was not very sufficient. This caused them a certain degree of difficulty, because it was easy to slip. "It should be in front. Everyone be careful," the Heen soldier reminded in a low voice. "I'll take the lead. I'm strong and can withstand the impact of the wild boar," Arthur suggested. His weapon was still the sledgehammer seized from Santiga, which was just right for dealing with wild boars with thick skin and high defense. "You'd better step back a little. It's not good to get hurt," Butler Richard said enthusiastically. Patrick also agreed with Richard. "That's right. Don't think your pretty face will work on wild boars." Desmond knew Arthur's strength, so he ignored the two men and said to Arthur, "I think you should lead the way, too." So Bracken walked to the front. Behind him, Richard was anxiously saying, "Is he reliable? What if he gets knocked over by a wild boar?" Patrick was also worried about his new friend. "You'd better not show off your strength. Let the strong soldiers go in front. Why don't you have any confidence in me?" Arthur turned around and refuted them. He was a man who could wield a sledgehammer after all. Just look at the hammer in his hand, and they shouldn't look down on him so much. At this moment, a hissing sound was heard, and then the ground began to shake. "Be careful," someone reminded him. "Arthur, get out of the way. Aim, shoot the wild boar's head. Lean against the wall, and keep the line." Various shouts were heard. Arthur looked back, and saw a frighteningly strong black pig rushing towards him at a high speed. Its long fangs flashed white light, and it seemed that it could smash any ordinary person into two pieces. But unfortunately, Arthur was not an ordinary person. He hid by the wall, then seized the opportunity, exerted all his strength, raised the sledgehammer and smashed it hard on the pig's head. Before the soldiers behind him had time to shoot arrows, they saw the wild boar, which had slid a few meters by inertia, fall down. Patrick walked boldly towards the fallen wild boar, and when he saw the miserable state of the poor animal's head, he immediately sucked in a mouthful of cold noodles. The wild boar's head had been dented, and the white brain matter and dark red blood were mixed together and slowly flowed out. The pig's trotters and body were still twitching, and it seemed that they were not dead yet. "Arthur, is your power given by God? How can it be so outrageous?" Patrick looked at Arthur with admiration. "He is handsome and powerful, and he is really a perfect friend." Butler Richard was also frightened when the wild boars rushed over, but he pretended to have expected such a scene. "I knew Mr. Arthur was here, so it could only be the wild boars that were injured." Desmond was very calm. He had seen Arthur beat a man to death with a hammer, and he was not at all shocked by this. "Okay, those who haven't loaded arrows, load them, and the rest of you, be alert. We'll rest for a while before moving forward." Unfortunately, the plan of the Reveran coach was ruthlessly shattered by reality. The remaining wild boars appeared at the intersection in front of them. After more than 30 pairs of human and pig eyes stared at each other for a while, the wild boars launched revenge for their dead companions. Into the turn behind, Arthur acted the fastest, because only in this way can you avoid the pig's sprint and then launch a counterattack. Although the people behind him did not have such awareness, they also did what Arthur wanted, turn around and run. Arthur now understands why less than 10 wild boars can run rampant in Harrenhal. There were only 3 big wild boars, covered with hardened mud, with big white teeth sticking out. They rushed over along the straight road side by side. Anyone who saw them would want to run away. Could they stay where they were and let them beat them half to death? Fortunately, the turning point was not far away. After everyone ran to it in a mess, they hurriedly raised their capstan crossbows. When the first row of wild boars scratched a few marks with their hooves to stop them, they were greeted by nearly 20 crossbow arrows. The effect of breaking through the defense at such a close distance was ridiculously good. These 3 wild boars were obviously not going to survive. The remaining 5 wild boars were not easy to deal with. Because the rocker capstan crossbow took too long to load arrows, by the time the soldiers shot the first arrow, the wild boars behind had already turned the corner. Arthur swung his sledgehammer to kill the wild boar closest to him, but the remaining 4 had already rushed again. In a moment, 7 or 8 soldiers had been rushed over. Although the rest also picked up swords and chopped, it was obvious that the effect of breaking through the defense was not very good. Only a few bleeding wounds were left on the wild boars, which did not make them lose their ability to move. The wild boars retreated to the corner of the wall, ready to charge again. Seeing this, Arthur hurriedly swung the sledgehammer and started to fight. In the shocked eyes of the crowd, Arthur killed 3 wild boars one by one with a hammer. After being hit by the last wild boar, the hammer god broke its spine and ended its life. "You are really brave." Butler Richard changed his expression to flatter. Patrick was about to praise Arthur, but suddenly thought of the pumpkin hammer. He suddenly realized that what he and Desmond said was true, and couldn't help but take a breath again. I didn't realize that he was born with such supernatural power. Arthur ignored their flattery and turned around to give the last wild boar a hammer. The Red Snake Prince Oberyn will never forget the lesson he learned from his life. Task: help Harrenhal to eliminate the wild boars. Experience plus 500. Harrenhal family favorability plus 5. After everyone packed up, they returned to the residential area. In the minds of the Westeros nobles, eating wild boar meat is easy to get sick, so it is not a good ingredient. Besides, the food supply in Harrenhal is very stable, so there is no need to eat this kind of meat. According to Arthur's modern soul knowledge, the nobles did the right thing. There are too many bacteria, viruses, and parasites on pigs, and it is really not good to eat them. I want to reward Sir Arthur for killing 6 wild boars for him so desperately. After knowing that they have eliminated the scourge and Arthur has made great efforts, Mrs. Heon said so. I suggest you give Mr. Arthur a big sword. That big hammer doesn't match his handsome image very well, Richard suggested. Arthur didn't know what Harrenhal's thank you gift was, but he still looked forward to it. After all, although Harrenhal is a little declining now, it is still a wealthy noble, and there are many good things in the family treasury. Mrs. Ian thought for a while and said, go and get the new moon. P.S. Please vote for recommendation and monthly ticket. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 45. I, Arthur, recognize you as my friend. New moon, exclaimed Richard, the steward of Harrenhal. Isn't it too? Lady Heen did not speak, but glanced at the steward coldly. Richard no longer insisted. After all, the lady was the owner of this place. He hurried out of the hall to find the sword. Desmond stood beside Arthur and murmured at this moment, it's new moon. Lady Shira is really generous. Arthur was a little puzzled, but also a little expectant. It sounded like this sword was very famous. Is this a Valyrian steel sword? Why are you all reacting so strongly? Patrick turned his head and looked at Arthur deeply. You haven't heard of this sword? This is a famous sword made of meteorite iron in Starfall City. Although it is not as famous as Dawn of the Dawnblade, it is also a famous sword. Dawn is a two-handed greatsword used by the Dawnblade of all generations. It is also a peerless sword second only to the Valyrian steel sword. The strongest knight of each generation of the Dane family in Starfall City and Dawn will be awarded the Dawn, and then known as the Dawnblade by the world. The recently famous Sword of Dawn is owned by Arthur Dane, also known as the Sword of Feudio. It is said that he can knock down 5 people with one hand while peeing. The material of the new moon is the same as that of the dawn, so it is not much different. Lady Hien really spent a lot of money to give Arthur such a thank you gift. Arthur noticed that the heir of Heijiang City had contempt, envy, and jealousy in his eyes, and his mood became a little complicated. Shame, expectation, and pride. Shame because he didn't know the name of new moon, expectation because he just happened to lack a two-handed sword, and pride because, although he didn't know this sword, it still fell into his hands instead of Patrick. Richard quickly returned with this famous sword. Then, at the signal of Lady Hien, he handed it to Arthur. "Madam, this is really too precious. I can't have it." Arthur was humble in his words, but his hands were very honest. He took the sword directly and looked at it carefully. Seeing this, Lady Hien was also very tactful. "Only people like you are worthy of using a sword like Shou. Take it. This is not only a reward for helping us get rid of a harm, but also a testimony of our friendship." She remembered that in the spring of 17 years ago, her husband Walter held a tournament in Harrenhal. Nobles and knights from all 7 kingdoms came, and even King Eras II, who had not left the Red Castle for a long time, came. At that time, the Hien family was rich, the territory was prosperous, and the friends they made were all over the 7 kingdoms. It can be said that the fire was boiling oil and the flowers were blooming. 17 years have passed, and the former friends are gone. Their territory is still prosperous, but the family has gradually become poor and declined because they can't collect taxes. It has declined to the point that it is now troubled by a few wild boars, and servants in the castle have been injured because of it. If it gets out, even the country folk will laugh at it. Lady Hien recalled the past and said with emotion, "What's more, our family members are gradually dying out, and no one can use it in the future. Isn't it a great regret in life to leave the sword covered in dust?" Arthur nodded and agreed with Lady Hien's words. "Then I will accept it." He suddenly pulled out the new moon, pinched it with one hand, and waved it a few times, feeling that it was just right for him now. After thinking about it, Arthur put away the new moon and tied it around his waist and said seriously, "Countess, I, Arthur, recognize you as a friend. In the future, if Harrenhal is in trouble, no matter where I am, I will come to rescue in person." She said this because this old lady is really a particular person. Although her attitude in giving the new moon sword was a bit pretentious, it was the kind of feeling that, because my Hien family is noble, you killed a few wild boars for me, so it is worth more and more expensive gifts. But it was a real sword given to Arthur. According to Arthur's thinking, this is an act of repaying a drop of water with a spring. Since Lady Harrington is a particular person, Arthur must express his feelings. "How you treat me, I will treat you." Arthur must save her life during the War of the 5 Kings. Lady Harrington smiled and covered her mouth. "It seems that I have received a promise from a brave knight." Arthur corrected her. "I'm not a knight, I'm just an ordinary person who keeps his promise. For the competition in King's Landing, I have to leave. But please believe that our next meeting will not be too far away." As soon as the tournament ended, the mountain would burn, kill and loot along the Red Fork River. Soon after, Robert died and King's Landing changed dramatically. Tywin had no worries and led 20,000 troops to attack the Riverlands and occupy Harrenhal. But in the current timeline, these may not all happen. The next time Arthur and Lady Harrington meet will be during this period. The Master of Harrenhal nodded, without thinking about what the next meeting means, and waved to the butler Richard to send them out. After the rest of Patrick and Desmond said goodbye, the group left Harrenhal. "It looks like it's going to rain. Let's speed up," Desmond shouted. Arthur looked at the horse under his crotch. It was already exhausted. "Let's go slower. My horse is foaming at the mouth." Patrick kicked the horse's belly with his foot, rushed to Arthur's side, and said with a smile, "Who told you to carry a sledgehammer? This poor guy not only has to carry you, but also a sledgehammer, a big sword and a piece of luggage. No way. Who made me buy only one horse?" Arthur was a little regretful. When he changed to the land route from the lower reaches of the Red Fork River, he should have bought a few more horses as backup. The group accommodated Arthur's speed and moved forward slowly. Many people prayed in their hearts that they could find a village before the rain to avoid possible storms. Unfortunately, God did not want to help people. The big raindrops fell from the sky. Although it dispelled the irritating heat, it also brought great obstacles to the team's progress. I hope your horse can hold on to the end. Jules followed his nephew and said softly. When Arthur heard this, he felt bad. It would be better if you didn't say it. After you said this, it couldn't hold on. Why? Patrick was a little confused. Does what you say have anything to do with whether the horse can hold on to the end? There is such a saying that the more you think about something bad not happening, the more likely it is to happen, and it often develops in a worse direction. Arthur explained to the two. Jules nodded in agreement. That's right. I have experienced such crow's mouth many times in my 20 years of wandering. Patrick looked unconvinced. Don't you two uncles and nephews make fun of me? How can this be true? As soon as the voice fell, Arthur felt the world turn upside down, so he jumped off the horse in a hurry. The poor horse fell to the ground, spitting white foam from his mouth, and it seemed that he would not live long. What's worse is that the dark clouds covered the sky, making it unclear, and the rain was getting heavier. P.S. Please recommend on monthly votes. Chapter 46 Heavy Rain. Arthur looked at the clothes scattered on the ground, feeling a little depressed. It seemed that he could only walk next. But how could a man say no? In order to relieve the pressure, the luggage carried by the horse was Arthur's change of clothes, including the silk top and pants worn in King's Landing. After all, he was going to the capital, so he had to maintain some decency. But these clothes were now lying quietly on the ground, letting the rain wet them. His personal servant Medon immediately got off the horse and ran over to pack them up. Desmond was walking in front, and at this time he also stopped and turned back to check the situation. Whoever is thinner, ride on the same horse with Mr. Arthur. The coach of Reveron shouted loudly. A clever attendant immediately responded, I can, I'm lighter. Arthur rejected the proposal. I'd better carry the hammer and the moon. These two items are very heavy. If I share them with other horses, it will fall down. As for this poor pony, let it lie here. Arthur still felt sorry for the horse. When he went ashore, he specially chose a red horse. The purpose was to match his family emblem of a golden shield and a red horse. Gentlemen, it looks like you are in trouble. Can I help? At this time, an old farmer drove a carriage past. He saw the group of nobles and their attendants standing in the rain and asked, Hey, you came at the right time. We need your carriage. Patrick said happily. Take this lord to your village, and take us with you. I'll give you a silver deer. The old farmer jumped off the ox cart, walked to the head of the red horse that was still foaming at the mouth, looked at it, raised his head and said, the horse is just tired and exhausted. It can still be saved slowly. Do you want to leave it here? When Arthur heard this, he immediately had an idea. Your ox cart looks very big. Can it pull this horse? After taking both of us? He was a kind and friendly man. When the situation allowed, he would also take care of the animals that served him. The old farmer looked at the red horse and said hesitantly, my cart can pull it, but it's hard to get it on the cart. Desmond saw that Arthur intended to take the horse away and suggested, gentlemen, there are 20 of us. If we work together, we can always get this poor thing on the ox cart. Arthur handed the hammer and the meteorite sword New Moon to the servant Medon, then wiped the rain off his hands and said, do I need your help? I can carry it up by myself. The old farmer saw that this group of people were very easygoing and didn't care about what he said. It's already this time, sir. Don't show off your strength. Let them come together, otherwise you will be exposed to the rain for half a day. Although Desmond knew that Arthur was born with supernatural powers, he didn't think he could lift the horse alone. He got off the horse and ordered, let's all get on together. Get off the horse and help Mr. Arthur. The servants got the order and got off the horse one after another. But obviously Arthur was one step faster. He squatted beside the red horse, holding one hand under the horse's neck and the other hand under the horse's belly. Then he used his legs and hands to lift up the huge horse, took a few quick steps, and slowly put it on the ox cart. Although the ox cart was large, it could only keep the red horse's trunk on the cart, and its 4 hooves and head were sticking out of the cart. The old farmer stared at Arthur blankly, his mouth wide open and unable to speak. Desmond and the servants also stared with wide eyes. They knew that Arthur was strong, but they didn't expect it to be so strong. This is a grown horse, and it was just picked up alive. Is this something that human strength can do? What are you standing there for? Hurry up, we are still in the rain. Arthur reminded the shocked boys, then took the sledgehammer and the moon from Medon, and jumped to the front of the ox cart. Everyone also reacted, with shock, confusion, admiration and other emotions. Those who should get on the horse got on the horse, those who should get on the car got on the car, and the team set off. Along the way, although it was raining, the old farmer continued to express his surprise and admiration. Honestly, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I really don't believe that anyone can lift a horse. Arthur ignored the old farmer's nonsense and asked, "Do you have an inn in your village?" "Inn? That's a new thing near the King's Road. We only have our own home." "Then it seems that I have to trouble you." Arthur touched his stomach and didn't know what delicious food the villagers had. They left Erenal yesterday morning and walked for a whole day and night to get here. They haven't eaten since this morning. According to his own feeling, every time he puts in some strength, his appetite will always increase greatly, and if it is a day of strenuous exercise, he often eats more. So now he wants to eat something good. Beef, mutton, etc. are best. Chicken and goose are also fine. Forget about trout. The most common meat for farmers in the Riverlands is trout, and he is already sick of it. Some meat, fried over a low fire. The pure meat aroma can make people salivate. It would be even better if there is chili pepper, minced garlic, vinegar or something to dip it in. The tongue coating felt slightly spicy, and the sour taste of vinegar, combined with the mellow aroma of the meat, was delicious. The rainstorm came quickly and went away quickly. Just when they had just reached the old farmer's village, the rain stopped. What bad luck. Desmond stroked his hair. New rain washes away old dust. Auspicious. Although he was soaked, Arthur liked this rain very much. He took out a silver deer from his purse and threw it to the old farmer. "This is a promise to you. Now go and mobilize your villagers to find us some clean clothes to change into and get us some meat. We are hungry." The old farmer had been staring at the silver deer since Arthur took out the money, and now he said happily, "Okay, my lord. What kind of meat do you want? There are chickens, sheep, fish, and dogs in the village for you to choose from. They are all freshly killed. The price is based on the market price. What do you think?" Arthur was very satisfied with this service attitude. "Then kill 2 lambs and get 7 or 8 chickens. You can decide on the staple food. Go quickly. The appetite of 20 adult men is still very large." The old farmer drove the ox cart to the center of the village, then jumped off the car to find the village chief. The others also found a dry place, dismounted and waited. Arthur moved the red horse down and let it lie more comfortably. After a while, it was able to open its big eyes, and its belly was heaving. It seemed to have recovered well. This village is quite wealthy. There is a circle of stone walls outside, and dozens of households live in stone houses. Patrick expressed his opinion. Desmond couldn't help laughing and said, "Don't you see whose territory this is? Does the Heen family have the ability to come here to collect taxes? They don't have to pay taxes, so they are naturally rich." Patrick agreed with this view, and he added, "What's even better is that it's only 3 or 4 days ride from King's Landing, so there's no need to worry about bandits." Arthur was not in the mood to discuss these things. He was worrying about what he should ride next. After all, he still had to travel today, and this horse couldn't stand up in a short time. P.S. Please recommend and vote for the monthly ticket. Tomorrow is a holiday, and I can start working on the geography introduction of Game of Thrones that I have postponed for a week. Chapter 47, Shield Village. In the open space in the center of the village, Arthur and his friends sat on wooden stools carried out by the villagers and ate around the table. Dinner was only in the afternoon, and lunch was already past the time. They could not do either, just to be full. Fortunately, the food was delicious. After Arthur finished half a chicken, a leg of lamb, and 3 pieces of freshly baked bread, his stomach finally stopped singing. "Where is the village chief? Come here," he ordered after taking a gulp of beer. A skinny old man wearing a wheat-colored top and grey linen pants came over with a smile on his face. "Master, are you satisfied with this hospitality?" Arthur nodded. "How much do I need to pay you?" This is the eastern part of the Riverland, which is more prosperous than the western part of the upper reaches of the Red Fork River, but because it is in the countryside, he can't tell the price. Just give us 6 silver deer in total. The old man smiled even happier when he heard Arthur take the initiative to pay. According to his rich life experience, nobles who can interact with civilians like this are often noble, but not many. More often than not, the villagers paid for their labor and food, but only received a beating. 2 half-grown lambs, 7 chickens, 5 or 6 bowls of fruits, and limited beer and bread. Only 6 silver deer in total, which made Arthur feel very cost-effective. He took out 8 silver deer from his purse and slapped 6 of them into the old man's hand. This is the meal money. Then he put the remaining 2 into the old man's other hand. This is a tip for you, to pay for your labor and feed the horses. The village chief clenched his hands and quickly retracted his arms to his side, as if Arthur would change his mind. But while doing this, the smile on his face became even bigger. It is our honor to satisfy the old man. I will not bother you. As he said this, he was about to retreat. But Arthur took out another golden dragon, the shining golden dragon, which made the old man stop retreating. Arthur bounced the golden dragon with his thumb, then caught it with his palm, and repeated this several times. The village chief's shining eyes also rose, and fell with the rise and fall of the golden dragon. Master, you said that we can definitely meet your requirements. At this moment, he believed that, if the master in front of him asked him to dig out his dead wife, he could immediately get her out of the grave, and then satisfy some of the master's hobbies. I need a few strong horses to carry me and my luggage, and I also need a solution for that red horse. The old man's wrinkled face suddenly became full, and he said excitedly, no problem at all. We can find a few strong horses among the horses plowing the fields in our village. Although they are not as good as the war horses of the adults, they can be ridden in turn. The effect is the same, and it will not delay your business at all. As for the red horse, I think we can take care of it and make it fully recovered. I guarantee that, when you return from King's Landing and pass by here, its red hair will become shiny and smooth when you see it again. Arthur asked back, how do you know that we will definitely pass by here when we return? The old man smiled and said, even if you don't pass by here, you can send a subordinate to pick up your little baby. Our village can't walk. Can we let hundreds of villagers stay away for a horse? Arthur nodded and agreed with the old man's words. Go and do it quickly. We will set off after we finish eating. He threw the golden dragon to the village chief. What is the name of your village? Desmond asked next to him. Shire village, my lord. The old village chief ran away flexibly, but turned back to answer. Arthur felt that the name of this village was very familiar. After picking and choosing in his memory, he remembered that this was a village that the mountain had massacred. According to the plot of the original book, after the mountain Gregor Clegane received the order from the Lannister head and Duke Tywin at Casterly Rock, he went east along the Golden Road, crossed the Blackwater River and went north, and began to burn, kill and loot from the east side of the God's Eye Lake, and slaughtered all the way to the upper reaches of the Red Fork River. The purpose of doing this is, first, to disperse the forces of the river lords, second, to reduce the war mobilization capacity of the river, and third, to make the river lords tired of pacifying the civilians in the territory and unable to cope with the call of the Tully family. Tywin, the man who served as the king's hand of the Mad King for 20 years, has a brain that few in the Seven Kingdoms can match. The success of this strategy almost made the Tully family lose the hearts of the people in the river. Soon after the war began, there was a famous saying, 3 spit, 1 for Lannister, 1 for Stark, and the remaining 1 for Tully. Arthur did not expect that the village he accidentally encountered would be the object of the mountain's kindness. It seems that there is a destiny in the dark, and he and the mountain are destined to fight. In a moment, the village chief and several villagers had brought 3 skinny horses to Arthur. My lord, are you satisfied with these horses? Although the horses are skinny, they are quite big, and there is no problem carrying a person. 1 horse for Arthur to ride, 1 horse carries Arthur's sledgehammer and sword, and the other is a spare, which is enough for Arthur to rush to King's Landing. The Lord of the Red Mill smiled at the village chief. I'm very satisfied. In view of your service to us, I'm willing to make a prophecy for your village, and give you some suggestions. Do you want to listen? He suddenly wanted to give these poor people some tips. The village chief didn't know what the old man was talking about, but for the sake of the golden dragon and the silver deer, he smiled and said, you tell me, I will definitely stop and keep it in mind. When the prophecy comes true one day, I will act according to your advice. Patrick, who was standing by, looked at Arthur's actions curiously and asked Desmond, what is he doing? Making predictions and giving advice. Who does he think he is? Desmond didn't know either. Look, Mr. Arthur is not a person who plays tricks. Arthur walked out of the range of the tables and benches and stood in an open space, his hands hanging naturally, his eyes closed, as if he was feeling some mysterious existence. Then, he suddenly raised his right arm, raised it high above his head, and muttered something in his mouth, as if he was communicating with something. The reason why he raised his right hand instead of both hands was because he didn't want to perform the Fago military salute. Arthur had previously decided to go to King's Landing to pretend to be a charlatan to make money. This time, he planned to practice giving predictions and advice to the villagers of Shire. The 3 servants in the surrounding villages were also attracted by his behavior. They whispered to each other and discussed what this master was doing. After feeling that he was pretending to be serious, Arthur suddenly shouted, then opened his eyes and gasped for breath. I predict, in more than a month, your village will be burned, killed, and looted by the army led by the tallest and strongest man in the 7 kingdoms, and after letting you bleed enough, this group of evil people will continue to go north and commit all the crimes in the world along the God's Eye Lake and the Red Fork River. P.S. New author, new book. Please recommend on monthly votes. Chapter 48 Savior. The villagers whispered to each other. They thought that what the young and handsome master said was a lie. Patrick, Desmond and the servants had more experience. Just by the adjective of the strongest man in the 7 kingdoms, they knew that Arthur was talking about the mountain. The strongest fighter under Lord Tywin, and the knight with the least sense of chivalry, Gregor Clegane. Ironically, the person who gave him the title was Rhaegar, the prince of the dragon family who was famous for his kindness and charity in the 7 kingdoms. How is it possible? If the mountain did such a thing, Lord Tywin would have skinned him without King Robert's order. Patrick looked disapproving. Although Desmond also thought it was impossible, he did not speak out against it because of his trust in Arthur. After talking to each other, the nearby villagers concluded that it was a lie. But in order to protect the face of the master, they did not deny it. Whatever the master says, that's what it is. Even if he really did all the evil in the world, we can only bear it, because we are just ordinary people. Only a little girl asked curiously, this is not the same as the story told by the grandmothers. There should be a hero to save us. Patrick smiled and said, silly child, if it is really the mountain that attacks, how can there be a hero to save you? Under the sword of the mountain, the hero can't protect himself. After hearing these words, Arthur swallowed back the words that he wanted to say to let the villagers flee as soon as possible and changed to another version. The prophecy is not over yet. There will be a tall, handsome man who will come here with the faith and prayers of all the upright and kind people in the world to save you from fire and water, life and death. Since he has decided to fight the Fish Wolf Alliance, why should he let these villagers escape? Why not start from here, stop the mountain, or even kill the mountain? Once this idea arose, it took root deeply in his heart, and could never be shaken off. Right here in the village of Shell, all the evil deeds of the mountain will be ended, and all the people in the Riverlands, who have suffered because of it will no longer suffer this unprovoked disaster. The little girl who asked the question earlier clapped her hands happily. Who is this tall, handsome gentleman? Can you tell me his name? Arthur replied loudly, his name is Arthur Braykin, and he is called Arthur the Righteous by kind people. Of course, after this battle, people may call him Arthur the Brave, because he bravely repelled the demons, and kept the people in the Riverlands from being disturbed. Patrick couldn't help laughing when he heard this, and he desperately clapped his hands on the table beside him. Desmond and some servants tried their best to suppress their urge to laugh wildly. The old village chief didn't understand, and asked, who is this Arthur the Righteous? Is he a famous knight? Desmond smiled and pointed at the Lord of the Red Mill, and said, it's this gentleman. Although the village chief was confused by the actions of Arthur and this group of people, he also maintained the proper etiquette. Maybe he was a young man full of fantasies. Wasn't he like this when he was young? He longed to protect the village and longed for the recognition of the villagers. The 60-year-old village chief looked like he was 16 at first glance. His tone became more and more sincere. Then I would like to thank you on behalf of all the villagers. Thank you for coming a long way to save us. Arthur heard this slightly sincere word and felt that his choice was not wrong. See you again in more than a month. After saying that, he ordered to leave. Although Patrick and others laughed at Arthur's actions and words, they also listened to the words of this companion. After quickly packing up, the group rode away on horseback. As for the poor Ed horse, I think it will be treated well. After walking for a long time, when Patrick felt that he no longer laughed when facing Arthur, he urged the horse under his crotch, strolled to Arthur's side, and asked, I still don't understand why you said such a thing in that village? Desmond also rushed to the side of them, listening to Arthur's explanation with his ears perked up. The Lord of the Red Mill thought about it and decided to continue to play the charlatan. You don't need to figure it out. This is what I saw and heard in the prophecy. Patrick held back his laughter and asked, which god told you? The 7 gods, the old gods, or the god of light who has been very active recently? This god is called Martin. Arthur replied, he is not a well-known god, but his magic power is far beyond people's imagination. Desmond had a blank expression on his face, but after hearing Arthur's words, he smiled and shook his head and said, I thought Mr. Arthur was a serious person, but I didn't expect him to be such an interesting soul. Arthur denied his words. It's not that I'm interesting. This is true. Martin is really a powerful new god. He told me a lot of things. In the future, as our relationship improves, I will slowly tell you the words of this new god. Since he wants to play the charlatan, he will pretend to be all the way. The god's name is Martin, and the only believer now is Arthur himself. The miracle is that everything Arthur says is true, but your new god doesn't have any miracles, temples, or monks serving him. Patrick felt that he had found something illogical in Arthur's words, and he said hastily, what kind of wrong view is this? The Lord of the Red Mill forced a look of surprise on his face to prevent himself from laughing. Does a real god need these useless things that only fake gods need? Seeing that Arthur had been acting very serious and didn't seem to be joking, Desmond said seriously, but how do you prove the existence of this Martin god? Arthur was also trapped by this. How to prove the existence of a person who does not exist in this world? But he reacted quickly and fooled the two men first. I will make more prophecies for God Martin. When the time comes, the successful verification of a few things will prove his existence. Time will be on our side. Patrick was very serious about his competition. Then you predict what I will encounter in King's Landing? Arthur looked at him. Your influence is too small. God Martin doesn't want to waste his power to predict for you. Then I will tell you about a person with great influence. If your God Martin can't predict him, then he is a joke compiled by your mouth. Patrick pondered for a while and gave the person he wanted to know. Let's talk about the newly appointed Hand of the King, the Guardian of the North, and the head of the Stark family, Lord Eddard Stark. Arthur carefully considered the plot of the original work and found that he, a small lord, could not affect Ed's death anyway, so he decided to tell Ed subsequent events. But before the prophecy, the complicated skill pre-shake must be shown. This is the first step to convince people. P.S. I have something to do today, so I rushed to code a chapter, and I may revise it tomorrow. Chapter 49, Game of Thrones History and Geography. 1. History. The original inhabitants of Westeros were giants, children of the forest and other strange creatures. Children of the forest are small humanoid creatures with dark skin and beautiful faces. Dyed white hair means black skin and white hair, which is awesome. The year when Aegon I the Conqueror conquered the Six Kingdoms was the first year of the conquest calendar. 12,000 years ago, the first humans crossed the narrow sea and arrived in Westeros. The conquest took place 2 years after landing, and all eras are counted from the first year of the conquest, that is, from the coronation of Aegon I in the Starry Sept in Old Town. Because they were the first to arrive on this continent, this group of humans was called the First Men. Most of the families in the north, the Blackwoods and Brackens and the Riverlands, and the Royce family in the Vale are relatively famous First Men families. After the first men and the children of the forest fought for 2000 years, the two sides made peace and the Dawn era began. 8,000 years before the conquest calendar, the White Walkers invaded from the north of Westeros, and the first men and the children of the forest joined forces to resist, and the heroic era began. Winterfell and the Wall were built by the builder Eddard Stark, and the Night's Watch was also established at the same time. Around 6,0 BC, the Andals crossed the Narrow Sea and arrived in Westeros. They quickly conquered the area south of the Moat Cailin and established 6 kingdoms, which were called the Seven Kingdoms together with the Kingdom of the North. Around 5,0 BC, the Valyrians tamed the dragons, conquered the continents of Essos and Sothoryos, and established the Valyrian freehold. 1,700 BC, the Rhoynar took refuge in Dorne, and after marrying the Martell family, they conquered the entire Dorne, and their leader was honored as the Prince. 200 BC. Valyria captured Dragonstone 100 years ago. The Valyrian noble Targaryen moved to Dragonstone to avoid the catastrophe predicted. Not long after Targaryen arrived at Dragonstone, the doomsday occurred. The Valyrian peninsula was destroyed, and almost all dragons and Valyrians were exterminated. I will talk about my guess later. The Valyrians may not be naturally occurring people, but magical creatures like dragons. 2 years before the conquest of the Westeros continent, Aegon Targaryen led his people to land on the Blackwater River and quickly conquered the 6 kingdoms, establishing the Targaryen dynasty, known in history as Aegon I King's Landing, was subsequently established at the place where Aegon landed. During the reign of Aegon I, over 30 years, Aegon was crowned by the Archbishop in the Cathedral of the Stars in Old Town, and the dynasty was stable. During the reign of Aenys I, after the church accused him of incest, an armed uprising of the church broke out. The mediocre Aenys appointed his younger brother Gormaid as prime minister to suppress the uprising. During the reign of Gormaid I, after King Aenys died, Gormaid succeeded to the throne and continued to suppress the uprising bloodily, but the situation became more serious, and King Gormaid had no heirs. During the reign of Jaehaerys I, Aenys' son succeeded to the throne and reached a reconciliation with the church. He pardoned the church's sins, and the church was protected by the royal family. The church army was disbanded, and the church no longer exercised judicial power. History called him Jaehaerys the Arbitrator. The long-term peace of the dynasty began from then on. During the reign of Viserys I, 103 to 129, the Dance of the Dragons civil war broke out. The Targaryen dynasty suffered heavy losses, and dragons were almost extinct. During the reign of Aegon II, the Dance of the Dragons ended, but Aegon II died soon after. Aegon, the son of Princess Rhaenyra, Aegon II's rival, succeeded to the throne and married Aegon II's daughter, known as Aegon III. During the reign of Aegon III, 131 to 157, the kingdom recovered from the war, but the last dragon died at this time. History called Aegon III the Dragon Scourge. During the reign of Daeron I, 157 to 161, Dorne was conquered by him, but was soon counterattacked and Dorne regained its independence. He was known in history as the Young Dragon. During the reign of Baelor I, 161 to 171, peace was made with Dorne, and the grandson of Prime Minister Viserys married Dorne. Baelor I was a devout believer in the 7 gods, and eventually died during a fast. He was known in history as Baelor blessed by the gods. During the reign of Viserys II, 171 to 172, the elderly King Viserys died a year after taking the throne, and the throne was passed to his eldest son Aegon. Aegon IV, 172 to 184, the incompetent King Aegon IV had many illegitimate children, the most famous of whom were Daemon Blackfire, Aegon Cold Iron Rivers, Brandon Bloodraven Rivers, and Ciri Oceanheart. Daemon Blackfire was given the family sword Blackfire of the Targaryen family, and his descendants were legalized. Daeron II, 184 to 209, Good King Daeron II married Princess Myrrha of Dorne, and married Princess Daenerys to the Prince of Dorne, and Dorne was officially incorporated into the territory of the Targaryen dynasty. Daenerys' lover Daemon Blackfire was unable to stop her from marrying, and launched the Blackfire Rebellion, which lasted for 2 years, and ended at the Battle of Red Grass Field. Bloodraven killed demon Blackfire, and Bitter Steel led the descendants of Blackfire across the Narrow Sea and established the Golden Company. Darren II's eldest son Baelor the Spearbreaker was prime minister, and his political achievements were quite good, but he died in the tournament of Poplar Beach to save the tall hedge knight Duncan. The next year, the Great Plague broke out, and Darren II and Prime Minister Baelor's sons all died of the plague. Darren II's second son Aerys succeeded to the throne. Aerys I, 209-221. Aerys was obsessed with reading and not good at governing the country, and handed over power to the Duke of Bloodraven. The kingdom was plagued by internal and external troubles. The Blackfire family constantly harassed the kingdom. Aerys I had no children, and after his death, his fourth brother Mika succeeded to the throne. During Mika I, 221-233, natural disasters continued to occur frequently, and the Duke of Bloodraven was imprisoned because of Mika I's jealousy. In 233, Mika I died while fighting against the rebels. After Mika I's death, the right of succession was in doubt. The third son, Maester Aemon, could have succeeded to the throne, but he gave way to his fourth brother Aegon. In order to prevent being used to attack his fourth brother, he voluntarily went to the wall and took the Duke of Bloodraven with him. Aegon, the king who should not be king, succeeded to the throne. During Aegon v. 233-259, the country was back on track. In 259, Aegon V caused a fire in Summerhall while trying to hatch dragon eggs. The king himself, his old friend and guard Duncan the Tall, and Prince Duncan the Short were all killed, which is known as the Tragedy of Summerhall. During the reign of Jaehaerys II, 259-262, Merys Blackfire led the people to launch the Battle of the Nine Penny Kings, but was quickly defeated. Merys Blackfire was killed, and the Blackfire family died out. Jaehaerys II was very wise, but weak and sickly. He died only 3 years after he succeeded to the throne. His son Aerys succeeded him. During the middle and early period of his reign, Aerys II, the Mad King, joined hands with Prime Minister Lord Tywin Lannister to make the Seven Kingdoms prosperous. His son Rhaegar was even hailed as the rising star of the dynasty. After the rebellion at Duskendale, Aerys II became suspicious and cruel, often burning dissidents to death with wildfires, and broke with Lord Tywin, which eventually led to tragedy. Robert I, 283-298, reigned for 15 years. Pay attention to this timeline. In 282, the usurper rebelled. In 283, Robert became king, and in 284, the war ended. Eddard had a big fight with Robert over Rhaegar's child, and then led his troops to the Stormlands to relieve the siege of Storm's End, and then the Battle of the Tower of Joy took place. Eddard, how can I govern a country with a bug like Robert? 2. Geography. Let's give some ideas first. The official size of Westeros is about the same as South America, but considering the existence of the North, the core area, where people mainly move, is actually much smaller. South America is about 17 million square kilometers, minus 1/2 to 1/3 of the area occupied by the North. There are more than 9 million people left. In terms of population, Martin did not give a clear number, but according to indirect information, the total population of Westeros is about 20 million. An area of more than 9 million square kilometers and a population of more than 20 million. Do you have an idea instantly? Yes, it is roughly equivalent to the Three Kingdoms period. But the weapons and armor are at the level of the late Middle Ages in Western Europe, and the daily necessities are from the Renaissance. There are many random things in the books and the series, such as the equipment of the mountain in the tournament in the first season, the square helmet. Does anyone think of other historical events? For example, the Crusades. This happened in 1291 at the latest, and there was still some time before the late 1400s. The following is a serious geographical introduction. There are 4 continents in the entire Game of Thrones world: Westeros, Essos, Sithorius, and an unknown continent. I can't find its name. If you know it, please tell me. The geographical distribution of these 4 continents refers to the British Isles, Eurasia, and Africa. The unknown continent is in the Far East. Let's start with the large continent of Essos. The sea between Westeros and Essos is called the Narrow Sea. There are 9 free trade cities near the Narrow Sea in Essos: Volantis, Bravos, Pentus, lies, Tyrosh, Hor, Lorith, and Faunus. Among them, Volantis and Bravus, prototype Venus, are the strongest. Pentus, lies, and Tyrosh belong to the second tier. Hor, Faunus, and Lorith belong to the third tier. The first two are inland cities with no ports and no fleets, so their strength is naturally weaker. Lorith is an island city-state. Its presence in the books and TV series is extremely low. I suspect that Martin used it to make up the number. Most of the free trade cities are located between the west coast and the eastern mountains of Essos. They can be regarded as the remnants of Illyria, except Bravus, and they were all established as colonies of Illyria. From the eastern mountains of the Essos continent, this mountain is actually in the west of Essos. To the east is a vast grassland called the Dothraki Sea. The prototype is very clear. It is the Mongol Empire. Just south of the Dothraki Sea is the Slavers Bay, where there are three large slave city-states, Yunque, Meereen, and Astapor, as well as many small city-states. These cities were built on the ruins of the ancient Gis Empire, and their characteristics are pyramids and harpies. The prototype is also very clear. Ancient Gis is ancient Egypt, and as for the slave trade, it is obviously a satire on the Europeans on the African continent during the triangular trade period. To the east of the slave bay is Lazar, located in the pastures and hilly areas south of the Dothraki Sea. The prototype is also very clear, so I won't talk about it, because I can't post this chapter if I talk about it. To the west of the slave bay is the land of Long Summer and Valyria, the once glorious capital of Valyria, but now only smoking ruins remain. Karth is a city-state in the southeast of the Essos continent, located at the node connecting the east and the west. It is known as the richest city-state, and is controlled by the royal family, the 13 lords, the Spice Guild, the Tourmaline Brotherhood, etc. The home of the rich man Zero is as big as a market, and the home of Illyrio, the governor of Pentus, is as shabby as a toilet in comparison. The 13 lords have a total of 1,000 ships, the Tourmaline Brotherhood has more than 1,200 ships, and the Spice Guild has 800 or 900 ships. In comparison, the navy of Westeros is very shabby, with 200 ships in the Royal Fleet, 200 ships in the Red Wine Fleet, and 100 ships in the Ironborn Fleet, which together are only a little over half of the Spice Guild. Next is the familiar Westeros continent. From north to south, they are the North, the Riverlands and the Vale, the Westerly, the Reach, the Stormlands, and Dorne. According to the arrangement of Letifu, a big V on a certain website, I will briefly mention several major elements of Westeros here. 5 rivers: Blackwater River, Trident River, Whiteblade River, Manda River, Greenblood River. 5 major passes: Kalen Bay, Golden Tooth City, Bloody Gate, Bone Road, Prince's Pass. 5 avenues: King's Road, Rose Road, Golden Road, River Road, Coastal Road. 5 islands: Dragonstone Island, Iron Islands, Shield Islands, Three Sisters Islands, Stone Steps Islands. 4 mountain ranges: Moon Mountains in the Vale, Golden Tooth Mountains in the Westerly, Mountains in the north, and Red Mountains. 3 forests: Wolf Forest in the north, Royal Forest in the Crownland, Crakewood in the Westerly. 5 strongest castles: the Twins, Harrenhal, the Eyrie, Casterly Rock, and Storm's End. Maybe you don't have a clear idea of what these castles are, so I'll use my own method to give you a deeper impression. It was mentioned above that Westeros is comparable to the 3 kingdoms, and the geography of the 7 kingdoms can also be compared. The Riverlands are roughly equivalent to the central plains around the Yellow River and the Huey River, but the area is significantly smaller. The valley is roughly equivalent to the Shandong area, surrounded by Mount Tay and Mount Yimeng, where agriculture, handicrafts, and maritime shipping are all very developed. The Westerly is roughly equivalent to the 3 kins moved southward, but mining has been strengthened, and agriculture has been reduced. The river bend is the large grain producing area of the Nanyang Basin plus the Jinxiang Plain, Suizhou Corridor, etc., and of course, it has the largest population. The Crownland is the plain area around Songjiang Prefecture. Coincidentally, Songjiang Prefecture is an estuary, and King's Landing is also the estuary of the Blackwater River. The Stormland is the area occupied by the state of Yu, which is a combination of the Kuanaji Mountain, the southeastern hills and other areas. For Dorne, You can imagine it as a vast area with few people and backwardness, but it has high united front value, so the leader is a prince. For the north, you can imagine it as the land of Yan and Zao, a bitter and cold area, so most of the locals value promises more than life and death. The north will never be forgotten, is not just talk. Of course, this metaphor is inappropriate, as long as everyone can understand it. Since the Three Kingdoms is used as an analogy, I believe that readers can also see the setting of the protagonist. It is Koko's geographical position plus Liu Ben's benevolent personality. P.S. Considering that this single chapter has more than 4,000 words, can readers cast some votes? Recommendation votes and monthly votes are fine. I'm not picky. Chapter 50 Arrival at King's Landing. Whether you believe it or not, I believe in Martin, the new god of humor. Desmond joked. Beside him were Patrick, Arthur and other companions on horseback. Except for the Lord of the Red Mill, everyone else laughed. They couldn't be blamed. The main reason was that Arthur's remarks about Martin were too outrageous. He made up a new god out of nothing, which would be a joke to anyone who heard it. In the past 2 days, Arthur had been giving them a vague description of what was about to happen in King's Landing. Many people understood, because it was easy to understand which force Arthur used as a synonym for wolf, deer, and lion. But not many believed it. Most people regarded his words as a joke. Arthur pointed at the group of people with his index finger. You guys who have never seen the world, how come you don't even believe in Martin? There are many gods in the Far East. For example, Patrick didn't want to let Arthur off the stage. He just wanted to see what tricks the Hammer God could come up with. Desmond and his attendants also leaned over and pricked up their ears to listen. They acted like this purely because the journey was too boring. It was not easy to find Martin's joke. How could he easily reveal this? You want to listen, right? Arthur sneered, took a deep breath, and began to spread the culture of Blue Star. For example, Namo Gatling Bodhisattva, holding a Gatling gun in his hand. One breath 3,600 turns. Every turn will save the predestined people. For example, Faraday, the god of electromagnetism, a blessing of 100,000 volts. Any extremely evil person can be blessed to hell. For example, the fire cloud evil god Nobel. The father of the circles Uchangzi. After talking for a long time, Patrick and others changed from the initial mentality of watching the fun to doubting that they were really shallow. Desmond, I don't read much. Are there really these gods? The heir of Heijiang City asked uncertainly. Desmond was also a little confused, mainly because what Arthur said was too real. Maybe the Meesters in Old Town know these things. I have never heard of them. These dozen names of gods and their main abilities did not seem to be made up. Maybe they were real. Jules followed behind and was also confused by his nephew, whether it was true or not. I have been in the free cities of Westeros and Essos for 20 years, and I have never heard of these gods. Arthur sneered. How many places have you been to? Do you know how big this world is? The Dothraki Sea alone is larger than the entire Westeros continent, not to mention Ashay and Alts in the east. The legendary Karth is even richer than other cities. How many people in Westeros have been there? The world is so big that most of the knowledge and facts cannot be known by one person. You should be respectful of what you don't know, Arthur pointed out with an air of old-fashionedness. The 19 people were all frightened by Arthur's words and nodded sincerely or falsely. Now you believe in Martin God? Still not, unless your prophecy comes true. Not all of them have to come true. 1 or 2 of them are enough. After all, what Mr. Arthur said is too outrageous. Desmond added. What if everything I said is true and happens in the future? How will you compensate for your ridicule of me now? You know, because of you, my fragile heart has suffered a great blow. Arthur covered his chest and pretended to be hurt. I, Patrick Mullister, swear that as long as one of the things Arthur said is true, I will only listen to your advice from now on. He smiled and stretched out his right hand, making a not so serious oath. Be serious, this is a god. Although Arthur wanted to laugh, it was related to his family's great cause of pretending to be a god. If he couldn't even fool these people, he might as well give up this job and go to bed. How can I be serious about what you said? If such an outrageous thing as the murder of Lord Eddard really happened, it means that the magic power of God Martin has reached a level that ordinary people cannot imagine, and his thoughts can affect the operation of the world. But, is this possible? Patrick explained. You accidentally glimpsed the truth, Arthur complained. Although he wanted to continue to make these people believe in him, he was really tired, so he stopped talking and let the skinny horse under his crotch carry him forward. The team suddenly became quiet, and the group hurried on their way in silence. At dusk that day, when the fiery clouds on the horizon rendered the sky into a beautiful painting, they arrived at King's Landing. This capital of the Seven Kingdoms, the residence of the king, and the second largest port city in Westeros, looks no different from other large towns, except that the residence clothes are more gorgeous, the houses along the road are more luxurious, and there are more knights and nobles on the road. The only difference is that there are too many people, shoulder to shoulder, sweating like rain, and dancing sleeves blocking the sun are not just talk. Here, Arthur found a sense of his past life, the feeling of being a descendant of the dragon. Even entering the city requires queuing. Legend has it that King's Landing stinks, and it really lives up to its reputation. Patrick took out a sachet from somewhere and put it on his nose to sniff. In the air around them, the stench of feces, urine, sweat, feet, and sewers mixed together, strongly irritating the noses of outsiders, so that they know they have come to King's Landing. In the original book, the little devil wanted to transform the drainage system of this city with a population of 500,000, because he couldn't stand the stench of King's Landing, but it came to nothing. It stinks worse than our stable. Arthur's personal servant, Medon, had no sachet to neutralize the stench, and he helplessly fanned with his hands, as if this would drive away the stench from his nose. But in fact, he fanned the fresh stench into his nostrils. Arthur comforted him. You should think like this. Our stable has caught up with the level of King's Landing to some extent. He couldn't stand the stench either, but there was no way. He could only endure it. After a few breaths, Arthur couldn't stand it anymore. He shouted to Patrick, "Do you have any other sachets? Give them to me." Patrick shook his head gently but firmly, not wanting to give Arthur his spare sachet. Although he felt that this little thing his mother gave him was a burden when he left Heijiang City, now it seems that it can save his life. He made up his mind to go out and pick out a few good sachets tomorrow and take turns. Give it to you. Arthur didn't want to let his body and mind be tortured by the stench, so he came up to Patrick and snatched the sachet. Then he put it in front of his nose and took a few deep breaths. After a few breaths, he felt that the whole world was refreshed. Patrick knew that he couldn't beat Arthur and looked at this unreasonable companion eagerly, hoping that he could return the sachet. Arthur ignored him and made himself comfortable first. He even had the leisure to glance at Patrick, wanting to see his embarrassed look with his sleeves covering his mouth and nose. But obviously, Arthur was disappointed. The heir of Heijiang City took out another sachet from the luggage on the horse's back, raised it to his nose and sniffed it. P.S. New author, new book. Please collect, recommend and vote for me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.